Hi, everyone, and welcome to the BI Livecast series. My name is Carrie Keenan, and I'm a Director of Content and Community here at Brand Innovators. Welcome to today's International Livecast on Brands Doing Good, Sustainability, and ESG. Today is really going to be a special one, and I'm thrilled to kick off our event. We've got a phenomenal day ahead with an awesome lineup of marketers coming to us virtually from companies like Cotopaxi, Bring It Bags, Field and Farmer, SiriusXM, Exelixis, and Electronic Arts. We'd like to thank all of our marketers for taking their time to speak and present here today. And we'd like to give a big shout out to our sponsors for helping make this event possible. We'd also like to thank our audience for taking the time to be here with us. Remember that we are live. The Q&A widget down at the bottom of your screen can be used to ask questions, and we'll get to them at the end of each session. That chat widget is down there too, and it's just for audience and listeners at home. You can use that to connect with other attendees and discuss the event in real time. With that, I'd love to welcome to the stage our first keynote speaker. We've got Davis Smith, the CEO of Cotopaxi, joining us today. Hey, Davis, you are on mute if you wanna. We want to hear your voice.
Sure, thank you.
No
we
worries.
That shouldn't be happening still, but thank you all. It's great to be with everyone. Very excited to be participating. I hopefully some of you know the Cotopaxi brand, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about the brand itself. And I'm going to share my screen here. Perfect. So, Cotopaxi is the name of a volcano in Ecuador, where I grew up as a child. My dad was an adventurer, and I ended up moving to Latin America when I was 4 years old. And I ended up spending all of my childhood and into my teenage years in a number of different countries in Latin America, and grew up doing just really loving the outdoors. My dad always had some kind of adventure planned. Whether it was floating down the Amazon on a self-made raft, fishing for piranha, or going and surviving on uninhabited islands, spearing fish and eating coconuts to survive. These are the kind of things I grew up doing, and I developed a deep love for the outdoors. And for every adventure my dad had planned, my mom had, she had scheduled things with our family where we would be spending time giving back. And I didn't grow up in a wealthy home. In fact, by US standards, we probably would have been considered poor, but it felt like we had so much compared to everyone around us. And what I recognized from a very young age was how lucky I was. I remember one of my earliest memories was seeing children that were my age, 3 or 4 years old, that were completely naked on the sides of the street. And even at that young age, I understood something was wrong. And I had to learn to reconcile why my life was different. And what I learned from this young age was that I wasn't smarter or harder working or more deserving or more ambitious. I had a different life simply because of where I'd been born. And so from the time I was a child, I knew that this is what I wanted to spend my life on. And I ended up, when I was in college, I was back in the United States, and I went to college here. My family was still living in South America. But I was back here, and I started looking for ways when I was in school to use my life to help others. And I found an internship in Peru, a really amazing nonprofit where I could go spend a semester giving and sharing and learning. And so I went to Peru, and I worked in a little city called Cusco. Hopefully some of you have maybe been there. Others might recognize the name from the llama from Emperor's New Groove. But this is just an amazing little city in the mountains of Peru, near the ruins of Machu Picchu. And while I was in the city, the first few hours I was there, I was blown away by this really magical place. Just ruins everywhere, and just this fascinating culture. And instead of going and eating my first meal in a restaurant, I went and bought some food, and I sat on a little park bench in the center plaza of the city, in the Plaza de Armas. And while I was sitting on this bench, all these little kids ran up to me. And they wanted to sell me things, finger puppets and postcards and candies and other things. And having grown up in Latin America, I immediately connected with these kids and I started joking around with them a little bit. And after a while, they all ran off. But there was one little boy that sat next to me on his shoe shining kit, insisting on shining my shoes. And it took me a few minutes to convince him it's not actually possible to shine tennis shoes. But he kept sitting on his shoe shining kit, watching me eat. And after a while, I realized maybe he was sitting here still because he was hungry. So I offered him the rest of my food. And I just never remember seeing somebody eat like this before. He absolutely devoured it. And that night when I ate dinner, I decided I was going to go back into the main plaza and look for this little boy again. His name was Edgar. He was 9 years old. He was always easy to spot because he had the same clothes on every day, with a hole in the butt of his pants, with no underwear on. So you could always spot him from a distance. And I found him straight away. And he was so grateful that I'd come back to find him. And he took the food and he ran over and started sharing it with his little friends. And they were eating the food with their hands, which really stuck out to me. But this became a daily ritual for me. The highlight of my day every single day was finding Edgar. And my last night in Cusco before I left Peru, I was walking down the street, walking back to my place. It was close to midnight. It was cold. You could see your breath in the air. And as I walked down the street, I saw two little boys cuddled against each other in the cold, trying to stay warm with their sweaters pulled over their knees. And as I approached, I recognized that one of the little boys was Edgar. And I woke him up and I asked him why he was sleeping on the street. And he told me that someone had stolen his shoe shining kit earlier that day, and he was too afraid to go home. His dad was an alcoholic, and his mom depended on him to help feed his family. This is a 9-year-old boy. And so I ended up giving him the little bit of cash that I had. And that night I could hardly sleep, just worrying about this little boy and the life that he lived. And the next day I got on a bus to leave Cusco for the last time. And the bus went around the main plaza to let some people on and off. And as I looked out the window, I saw Edgar and he saw me. And I had just enough time where I slid open the window of this bus and he ran next to it, waving goodbye to me with a big bag of candy under one arm that he'd bought with the money I gave him. And he was now selling the candy in the streets. He was a true entrepreneur, which I really love now. But it was on that bus, I wrote in my journal that day on that bus that I was making a commitment to use my life to find a way to help the Edgars of the world. And I've thought of Edgar every single day since 2001. It's been over 20 years. And he's really, truly been an inspiration to me of how I wanted to use my life. After I graduated, I spent 10 years as an entrepreneur building 2 different businesses. My last business back in Latin America, where I grew up, I was living in Brazil, building a business there, when I had the inspiration to go build something that was more meaningful. Again, every day I was thinking about this purpose that I had, and I was honestly feeling pretty discouraged that I was not meeting this fulfillment, fulfilling this mission and this dream that I'd had of using my life to help others. And one night in bed, as I was laying there, I was thinking about this, and I'd set a New Year's resolution to find a way to fulfill that mission. And I came up with this idea of building a brand that I could scale that would allow us to sustainably fight poverty. By using the profits of the brand to go do good, and by using the business to inspire others to do good with us. And so I came back to the United States and I started building this brand called Cotopaxi, named after this region of Ecuador where I lived. The school I went to in Ecuador as a kid and teenager was called Academia Cotopaxi, so named after this volcano. We've been building the brand for about 7.5 years. We build amazing outdoor products. We make backpacks and bags and jackets and other outdoor gear. And we've even done some really fun collaborations like with Hoka and Teva, but all focused on this idea of using a brand to do good in the world and to change capitalism for the better, to use a business and a brand to show that you can do capitalism differently. 94% of all of our products last year were made of remnant and recycled material. You can see a lot of our bags, this Del Dia collection of bags, which is a big part of our business, is made of remnants. These are leftover materials from our factory that other outdoor brands that you all know of use the same factory, and we use those remnants to make products. And we empower the sewers to go create the bags, and we give them a voice for the first time. They get to go, they're amazing, talented artisans and craftsmen that generally just sew the same thing over and over and over that someone else tells them to make. And instead, they have the creative power to go choose what materials and what colors to use, with the only rule being to make no bag alike. So this Del Dia collection is made of these remnant materials, and every bag is unique. And then we use the brand to go do good and to fight poverty. Last year, we helped 1.2, almost 1.3 million people living in poverty around the world. Most of our focus is on Latin America, and especially the Andes region where I lived, in Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. And it's something I'm just incredibly proud of. We support nonprofits that focus on kind of three pillars that we believe are inextricably linked to poverty alleviation, which are healthcare, education, and livelihood training. So we don't really have a buy one, give one model. This isn't us giving away a product. We really are trying to tackle the very root of causes of poverty. And we believe that we can eradicate and be a part of this movement of eradicating extreme poverty. And my goal is to do that in my lifetime, to be a part of that mission. One of my favorite stories of our brand is a small thing, but anyone that orders a bag from us or a jacket from us from one of our retail stores or from our website, they will get a handwritten thank you card written by a refugee here in Salt Lake City. These are resettled refugees. It's shocking, but refugees, there's millions of them around the world. 1% of refugees are ever resettled. And here in Salt Lake City, in our community, we've had 30,000 refugees that have been resettled over the last 20 years. And it's a big part of our community, and we're so proud to have them here. And a lot of these refugees, when they arrive, are having to learn a new language. They're having to learn new job skills. And we created a job club at our company where our team volunteers to teach how to create a resume, how to do a job interview. And many of these refugees can get their first job working with us. And one of the programs we have is this refugee card writing program, where they write the thank you card in their native language. They write their name, where they're from, and what language they speak. And so it's just another great touch point that allows us to further our mission and further our impact. Many of you, may be wondering whatever happened to that little boy, Edgar, that I met in Peru in 2001. And I've wondered the same thing for years. I wondered whatever happened to him, if he was able to go to school, if he had, as he's entered adulthood, was he able to find a career that was fulfilling to him and start a family maybe. Well, a few years after starting Cotopaxi, I decided I needed to go try to find him. And I knew it was an impossible task. I only knew his first name. I knew he was 9 years old in 2001. And I knew he shined shoes. That's about all I knew. But I was armed with a picture of him sitting on his shoe shining kit and a little 13-second video of him running next to this bus waving goodbye to me. And with that, I went into Cusco for the first time since I'd lived there as a college student. And I started showing people these images. And through a series of miracles, I ended up finding Edgar. And it was one of the most beautiful and fulfilling moments of my life. And we spent a day together where he told me his life story, and he wanted to show me his home. He was so proud to show me this little home that he'd helped build. And so we took a little bus up into the hills of Cusco and then walked up the side of this little mountain to get to his home. He told me that his mom had died giving birth to his younger brother when Edgar was 11, and that his father had died of alcohol abuse a couple of years later. So they ended up living on the streets for a number of years and in shelters. And he's, raising his younger siblings. And we got to his home, and he was so proud to show it to me. And we got there, it was a home made out of mud. And the toilet was a hole in the ground. And there was a part of me that was so discouraged to see how he was living. But then there was another part of me that was so proud of him because he was so proud of what he'd accomplished on his own. And we started talking about what his dreams were, what his ambitions were, and what he could, if he could do anything, what would he want to do? And he talked about this dream that he'd had of becoming a tour guide because he knew Cusco better than anyone. He'd grown up on the streets. He'd learned English quite well speaking to tourists every single day. He was still selling things on the streets to tourists until that day. But he talked about how to become a tour guide, there was a 3-year program that you had to do, and there was no way he could do it. So we made an agreement where if he did well in school, I'd help him with this program. And I started getting, pictures of his report cards, and, he did pretty well most of the time, which just really proud of how he was balancing everything. And after 3 years, he graduated, and in 2020, he was set to graduate. And of course, this was all disrupted by COVID-19 pandemic. And so he reached out to me, and we're in touch every week. He's one of the most active Facebook users on the planet. So we're in touch constantly. But he sent me a note the first week of May in 2020 and said, I am embarrassed. I don't know how to tell you this. And I'm embarrassed that I have to ask for help, but I am desperate. We have no food. We have no work. Tourists are not even allowed to come into the country. And so I have no way to sell them things. I have no way to give tours. I don't know what to do. And I went to bed that night just ill, worrying about him and not sure even how I was supposed to help. Like, do I just send him money? I didn't want to be in a situation where he was just constantly reliant on me anytime he needed help. And that night I was kind of sleepless and rolling around all night thinking about it. And at 5 a.m, I ended up having this idea that I knew would work. And I reached out to him first thing in the morning and gave him the idea and asked if he'd be interested in doing it. And the idea was if he could create a virtual walking tour of Cusco, a 30-minute walking tour that would allow people that were stuck in their homes during this pandemic to go experience a part of the world that I think everyone wants to go see and experience. And I didn't create the video for him. I didn't do translation for him. He did everything on his own. And that was part of the goal, was for him to be able to learn to do this on his own. And it took some practice, and it took some doing it a few different times and learning some good lessons. And he ended up creating a really great video. And even the subtitles that he did at the end were pretty good. And it was just amazing to see Edgar as he is now has his own small business. And I shared this online, and we ended up having over 1,000 people that ended up buying these $10 tickets, virtual tickets to watch his tour. And so he's got a small little storefront now in Cusco where he sells paintings, which is what he was doing on the streets before when I met him, and where he also provides tours. And so it's his own business, and he's building it in his own way. And it's just so inspiring to see the life that he's lived. This is my question for each of you, really, is who is your Edgar? Who is the person or the thing that can inspire you every single day to look beyond yourselves? And I am so grateful to have him in my life, this friendship that will be a lifelong friendship, and where I get to learn and grow from him, and he from me. And we have this support where we can look out for each other. And it's been such an inspiring friendship for me, and really is the inspiration behind the brand of giving back and doing good and finding the way that we can use whatever talents we have in life to lift and help other people. So that's the story of Cotopaxi, and just so proud of what we're building. And feels like we're just getting started. We have a couple hundred employees, and we're looking to build the next iconic outdoor brand, and hoping that we can do that in a way that always puts people first, and that shows that we can build businesses that can both do well and do good at the same time.
That was amazing, Davis. I didn't realize I'd be starting out this live cast day crying. So thank you for that. But thank you for sharing that story of Edgar. That was amazing. We're going to bring in our moderator, Rachel Cohen, the manager of corporate sales from Conquest, and I'm going to let you guys take it from here.
All right. Welcome, Rachel.
Hey.
Good.
Hi, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Hi, Davis. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Davis and I spoke as we prepared for this, and I have to say I listened to an interview that Davis did, so it was really nice to hear about you following up with Edgar and hearing more about his story. Something that Davis and I spoke about as we were preparing for this is just about how business leaders have a responsibility to focus on more than just profits. But I'm wondering, and I, completely agree with that. And that's, if you know more about Davis's story and Cotopaxi, you know that that's always been his focus. But I'm wondering, in addition to sustainability being good for the world, in your experience and for Cotopaxi specifically, how have your sustainability efforts been good for the brand and the business overall?
Yeah, I did believe from the very beginning that doing good was going to be good for business. And this is when I moved back from Brazil, I went to Silicon Valley and I started meeting with investors, impact investors, angel investors, venture capitalists. And I ended up meeting with 100 different investors to pitch this idea. And I faced a lot of rejection. People that questioned whether I could really build a brand that was sustainable if we were giving away money from the very beginning before we ever made money. But we ended up having some investors that really believed in us and that stood behind us. And so Kirsten Green from 400 Ventures was our first backer. I think, we've learned a lot of great lessons, but that number one, I think we validated this idea that if you choose to do good first, that customers will back you. They'll believe in the mission. And if it's done authentically, they'll want to be part of that because you represent values that they also care about. There were some lessons also that we learned that I hadn't really anticipated. One of the things that I didn't really expect to see was the benefits of our ability to attract and retain talent. And so there's a role that I'm searching for right now that we ended up having 1,000 applicants for this role. And I never saw that in my previous businesses ever. I mean, nothing close to this. And when we see applicants, it's everything from young people saying, "Hey, I'm in college and I'm just so passionate about the brand. I'll come sweep the floors. I'll do anything. I just want to be part of what you're doing." And then we have people that are at the tail end of their career saying, "I've spent a really successful career in whatever industry, and I just want to finish my career somewhere that matters, that's aligned with my values." And so I think this is something that speaks to people from every generation, every gender, every color. Like, I think as humans, we care about others. That's what makes us special and unique, is that we care about each other and we try to look out for each other. And we have this desire to make the lives of other people better. And sometimes we don't really know how to do it. So when we find out something that really speaks to us and to our hearts, it's something we want to be a part of. We want to be part of that movement. So we certainly felt that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up, talent and your team. One thing that I really like about your story and Cotopaxi is that when you, we're starting out, you were thinking, yes, sustainability in terms of the environment is important. We definitely want to be aware of that. But the main focus for you was always helping other people, and especially, people that you knew from living in other countries that, were in extreme poverty. But then, on top of that, something I've been thinking about a lot, I shared with you that I attended a brand insider summit, hearing from a lot of retail brands a couple of weeks ago. And something very unexpected for me, at least, is that because of the pandemic, people and talent is such a priority at all levels of a business, for every brand right now. And it's part of their brand image. How do people understand the employees of a certain company to be treated? How are the employees essentially representing that brand at every level? So I'm wondering, at Cotopaxi, how do you get your employees involved in your sustainability initiatives, and how has that kind of benefited your team?
Yeah. So, this has been something that's been important to me. Something I've talked a lot about it within our organization is being a keeper of the flame. We can't create a movement and can't be part of changing the world if I'm the only one that is holding the flame, that is the flame bearer. We need every person in our organization to be a keeper of that flame. We need our customers to be keepers of the flame. And so the way we do that is by engaging people and allowing them to be part of this movement. And so we started that by, the day that we launched our brand, we started with an event called the Questival, which was this 24-hour adventure race. And it was a pretty crazy event. We got a couple llamas off the classifieds and we went around college campuses and people came up to us to take selfies with these llamas. And then we tell them about this new brand that we were building, about this event, this 24-hour adventure race. And we had thousands of people that participated in that first race. And we gave them hundreds of challenges to go out and spend time in the outdoors with their friends and to go do good in their communities. And they got points for doing these different kinds of activities. And we ended up having 30,000 social media posts of people outliving the brand, and everyone that did the race got one of our backpacks. And so that was kind of the start of like saying, hey, we want other people to be part of doing good with us, not us just doing good ourselves. And our team, same thing. We started, in our early team, there were just about 6 of us that when we started, and then we slowly added a few more people. And that card writing program that I talked about, the refugee card writing program, that was an idea from an intern of ours. When we first started the business, I was doing the handwritten thank you cards to every customer. I knew it wasn't scalable, but I wanted those early customers to know how much it meant to me that they were supporting us. And this intern said, hey, I know that you're worried about that. You can't keep writing these thank you cards, but what if, she's like, I know how passionate you are about refugees. And I was starting to get involved in some refugee programs here in Utah when I moved here from Brazil. And we came up with this idea together with this intern. And so, same with the Del Dia line of bags, those really colorful, one-of-a-kind ideas. That wasn't an idea I had. It was an idea one of our product designers had, knowing how much we were passionate about the workers in the supply chain. And how do we make their lives more fulfilling? How do we make sure that they're paid fairly? How do we make sure that they have work that allows them to use their skills and talents and develop professionally? And so, a lot of the very best ideas we've had as a brand have come from our team by empowering them and by basically inviting them to be part of this exploration with us of how we make the world better.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I have one more question that in the interview that I listened to that you did, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit in your talk at the beginning, but I know that the very first company that you started was a website called pooltables.com. And in the interview that I, listened to with you, you talked about how, you knew you wanted to do good in the world. You thought, if I could make some money, I can turn around and use that money to fund initiatives that are important to me and will help other people. And so, you started this business, pooltables.com. Fast forward many years later, you start Cotopaxi, and you go about starting Cotopaxi in a very different way. You held yourself to very high standards. Cotopaxi is a B corporation. You knew that giving back was going to be inherently part of the business. So I'm wondering, what is the challenge of, or what is the difference between starting a business, with those sustainability standards from the outset versus taking an already successful business and, turning it around or making it be more sustainability focused?
Yeah, this is a fun question. So, when I was in college and I came back from Peru, I thought I would pursue this path of working for a nonprofit. I thought that was maybe my life's calling. And it was a mentor that I met in college that kind of redirected me. And he'd been a successful entrepreneur and had become a philanthropist. Had started a nonprofit in the Philippines that was fighting poverty. And I wanted to work for him. And I tried to convince him to let me go work for him and to expand his program from the Philippines to Latin America, where I'd grown up. And he instead told me that if I really wanted to make a difference, I shouldn't go work for a nonprofit or for him. I should go start my own business, and that down the line, I'd be able to make a bigger impact and find my own way of making an impact in the world. And so that put me down this path of entrepreneurship. And I knew nothing about business. I hadn't studied business. I'd studied international studies in undergrad. But I had this idea, a random idea. I kind of dabbled in a few different ideas. A couple actually, they had social impact connected to them, but the ideas didn't work. They as I tested them, they kind of failed. But I found this other idea, which was to build a company called pooltables.com, which was this idea of building our own brand of pool tables and then selling them direct to consumers online. So kind of one of the earliest direct to consumer digital brands. This is in 2004. So the internet was, relatively new. E-commerce was relatively new. But the brand had no social impact at all. And all the passwords of that business were connected to social impact and helping children in poverty and other things. And so it was in my heart, but I just didn't know how to connect business and doing good. It just wasn't obvious to me for some reason. And so I thought, maybe I just need to learn how to build a business first. So I spent about 6.5 years building that business. And, it was a great first time, experience as an entrepreneur. Our first year, we did about $1 million in sales, and then we kept growing from there. And after 6.5 years, my cousin and I sold the business. And then we went off to business school, and my cousin went to Harvard Business School. I went to the Wharton School. And then when we graduated, we moved down to Brazil and built our previous business. And so, when I started building Cotopaxi, I wanted to build it completely differently than I'd ever built another brand. And it started to become more obvious to me how I was supposed to connect impact and brand and business. And, you mentioned this interview that I did a couple of years ago with Guy Raz, with How I Built This podcast. And it was a really fun conversation. And he asked a lot about that pool table business. At the time, I had no intentions of ever being involved with that business again. I had sold it, a decade before. But last year had an interesting opportunity where I still owned a small part of the business. And the guy that we'd sold it to was retiring, and he had 17 different businesses that he'd kind of gathered over the years, and he was selling them all. And he'd found a buyer for the business, a small publicly traded company that was going to buy the business. And at first I was glad for him. I was like, good for him. That's great. And the more I thought about it, the more I just felt like I had unfinished business. Like that brand was my first attempt at entrepreneurship. And I really wanted to do good, but I didn't know how, but I know how now. And so I ended up buying the business back. I paid a lot more than I sold it for, but I believe in the ability for business to make an impact. And this business had been profitable for 18 straight years. And I just thought, I'm going to go convert it to a benefit corporation. So I bought the business the first day. I converted it to a benefit corporation. And now we're working on creating a plan where this business can help us go fight poverty alongside Cotopaxi. There are some unique challenges, with a brand like Cotopaxi that starts from the beginning with impact at the very heart of the brand. In some ways it's easier because you're so committed to it from day one and you can kind of build everything around it. At the same time, it's really hard because you have no money. And so you're donating and giving away money before you've ever made money. And that was incredibly stressful. Where with this pool table business, it's been profitable. So in a lot of ways, it's been a lot easier because we have the resources to go have impact immediately. And so, but it's been a fun thing to kind of see the challenges that come with taking an existing business and converting it to a business that's doing good versus doing it from the start. But my hope is that I can prove that no matter what the business is, no matter how old it is, no matter what industry it's in, you can go do good. And if a pool table business can go make a difference in the world, so can your business. So that's what I'm hoping we can prove.
Yeah, I love that message. And I think too, just with your idea of doing capitalism differently and no matter what your role is or what business you're in, you can do good. You do have an impact on the people around you, the people you work with every day. So I love that. That's great. We got a few great questions from Jeffrey Hilder in the Q&A. I think the one it might make sense to ask you first is just as a purpose-driven brand, how are you and your team measuring success?
Yeah. So, obviously there's a few ways that we measure success, and some of those are financial success and some of those are impact success. And obviously we need to measure both of them. We can't have success with our social mission if we're not having success as a business. So, I'd say that's one of the things that really matters to us. The last 3 years we've been profitable, and that was a really big milestone for us because I knew that we couldn't sustainably do good if we weren't sustainable ourselves. So that's, of course, a very important measure. And we've seen some very exciting things there. This year we're going to double our revenues. We'll double in size this year alone. And so we're seeing a lot of really fun growth in the business. But of course, what's most exciting to me is the impact that we're having. And so that's what I wake up thinking about every morning. It's what gets me out of bed and keeps me so excited about what we're building is the impact that we can have. So last year we helped almost 1.3 million people, living in poverty. And so that was just a massive milestone. The first time we've crossed that million people mark. We have an impact report that we publish every single year that kind of outlines our impact and talks about our impact partners, talks about those 3 pillars that I mentioned before: education, healthcare, and livelihood training, and where we're focusing those dollars. And of course, it's not just money that we donate, but we also, our team volunteers, and we have a lot of impact through our supply chain and other things that aren't necessarily reflected in a dollar amount that's donated. We also, last year in 2021, we donated over 200,000 face masks to communities in need, which was about $700,000 worth of impact as well. And so these are the kind of things that we just are very passionate about. And I'm not an impact expert. Something I'm very passionate about and I'm learning. But we've hired some really great people on our team that are experts and that make sure that we're doing this in the right way. The first year in the business, I ran the impact side of the business as well. And it was really fun. At the same time, when we brought someone on that knew what they were doing, man, it was a game changer. And we just started doing things in a much more disciplined way. I think we hired a chief impact officer before we even had a marketer on our team. And you can imagine what my board thought about that. They were really questioning whether that was the right place to be investing dollars that early in the business. But I just figured if we couldn't figure out a way to give better than anyone else and do it in the most sustainable way, in the most impactful way, we had nothing. That was really, the entire brand was built on this idea of giving. And so I wanted to do that right. And so I think that's been an important part of our impact is making sure we have impact experts that can come in and help us make the best decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of leads to another one of Jeffrey's questions and something I've heard you speak about. It's tough, I think, to, as a brand, know the impact that you're truly having. You've talked about kind of, making some mistakes and learning things in the beginning to understand how best you can do this. And I think we've all heard of brands that, are intending to make some kind of positive impact and then have unintended consequences, or maybe aren't doing everything that they say that they're doing or something like that. So Jeffrey's curious, how do you balance the purpose messaging or letting, the world know about all of the good things that you're doing with the sales messaging and letting people know about your product? And, I would almost take it a step further. How do you make it so that you're not just trying to not make it seem like you're just trying to do these good things to sell more stuff, essentially?
Yeah, no, that's really important. When I had the idea for the business, I went and met with a couple of friends of mine from business school who had started Warby Parker, and they'd invested in my previous business in Brazil. I'd done a small investment in Warby Parker when we were still students. They were still selling out of their apartments, like just very, very small business still. And so we'd been friends and kind of been rooting for each other's success. And I outlined to them like this idea of building this brand, the Cotopaxi, around impact. And one of those co-founders mentioned to me that, he really felt that I needed to be careful to not lead only with mission, that I needed to have, I really needed to have great product as well. And so, because every time I talked to him about the business, it was about the mission and the purpose. And he's like, make sure that you nail the product because you have to nail that as well. And it was really great advice. And because I'm so passionate about the mission that I tend to lead with that constantly, whether I'm talking to an investor or to consumers or even like this presentation, right? It's like, I'm not even really talking about the product. I'm just so passionate about what we stand for and our purpose. And so it is a tricky balance of how do you balance these two things? And I'd say we've probably erred on the side of always having our mission first and talking about that. At the same time, if you go to our Instagram, there's a lot of imagery that's around the product and around, people using the product around the world and kind of the aspirational aspect of the brand. And so it is tricky. And I don't know that we've actually totally nailed it either. Like I just had a conversation with our executive team yesterday about how, and our impact team and our brand team about how I want our impact to be more at the forefront of the brand. Like this cannot be on the periphery of who we are. It can't feel like an afterthought. Like this needs to be deeply woven into everything that we're doing. And so again, I would probably lean more towards talking about the purpose than selling, just because it's my inclination. That's what I'm really passionate about. And I think if you do it right and you do it authentically and it's real, consumers are very smart. They know if it's not real. They know if you're doing it because you're trying to get something out of it, or if you're doing it because it's something that's authentic to who you are. And so, but it is a tricky balance, and not every business has gotten it right. And I will maybe just add, Rachel, that I think it's I think it's okay if a business is trying and maybe they fall short. I'm not saying that they can misrepresent. Obviously, that's unacceptable. But I think a lot of businesses are learning how to. They've been around for a lot of years, and they're trying to figure out how they can be part of this movement. And I want to be careful. I don't want to criticize any business that's using their resources to go do good. My hope is just that all of us are learning, and that we can find better ways over time to do it more authentically and have better impact. And I hope that more and more businesses move in this direction. And I think it's young people that are going to make this happen. They expect it out of the companies they work for. They expect it out of companies they support and buy from. So I'm very optimistic about the future of business. I think capitalism will absolutely change in a massive way in our generation or in the next generation or two because of the expectations of young consumers and the young generations.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I like that perspective of yours, because I think that it is all about authenticity. If brands are authentically trying to do something good, they're inherently going to make mistakes, and it's about owning those mistakes and moving forward and just trying to improve, like, we're all trying to do in our roles all the time. So I'd like to know a little bit more about your advertising model. I mean, I think this kind of goes into what we were talking about, and really a lot of the retailers that I spoke to a couple weeks ago did talk about this millennial and Gen Z audience and how they can really sniff out anything that's not authentic. So I think that's part of this conversation as well. But I know too that, as you talked about, I feel like your first advertising activation involved llamas and college campuses. So how have you all evolved since then, and how do you focus your marketing efforts?
Yeah, so there's definitely not a silver bullet. I know when you, as an entrepreneur, you start a business and you just think, oh, if I could just find that one thing that like changes things and that like gets me on the map or that gets this business to work. The reality is that there isn't just one thing. You have to do 1,000 things really well. And I'd say with advertising, yes, those events, those experiences that we created with Questivals were really impactful in the early days. We had that first event in Salt Lake City where we're based, and then we had the next one in San Francisco, and then we had one in Las Vegas, and then Seattle, and we started doing them all over the country. And we had over 100,000 people participate in those early events where people were actually living the brand. And I think that's why the event worked. Is like it wasn't just us trying to sell something; it was allowing people to go live the brand values that we had of adventure and giving back and serving others and creating memories together. And so those experiences were really important. But of course, you have to be good at some of the traditional marketing, digital marketing, making sure that you're efficiently acquiring customers and creating awareness around your brand. Of course, there's PR strategies around, how do you make sure that you're in the press and that people are talking about some of the good things that you're doing or how you're building a brand differently. There's ambassadors, brand ambassadors that and influencers through social media. And so, I'd say we do all of the above. You have to do all those things really well. I think, really probably the most unique thing though that we've done is that idea of creating experiences that allow people to go live the brand, and not just through Questivals, but through other opportunities of service and giving back. We hold a lot of events around supporting refugees. And I think those are always great activations that allow people to go, not just donate, but to actually get involved in some of the good work that we do.
Absolutely. In the interview I listened to with you, you talked a lot about how Cotopaxi was a digitally native brand. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you all built up your digital presence and how you sort of balance that with your presence with your brick and mortar stores and the retail partners that you work with?
Yeah. So, this term digitally native brand, I think it emerged maybe in the last like 6 or 7 or 8 years. And it's something obviously that had existed before. I mentioned the pool table business being like one of the earliest digitally native brands. And what I mean by a digitally native brand means a business that started and emerged online first. And that primarily their primary sales channel was online. And so a lot of digitally native brands have become omni-channel brands where they're not just selling online, but, I mentioned Warby Parker. There's another brand started by another classmate of mine from business school called Allbirds, another called Harry's. These really fun brands that have been built around not just selling online, but they have physical retail stores of their own. Many of them actually sell their product through other retailers. Like, we sell our product through REI and through hundreds of other small boutique outdoor retailers. And so, I think, this is an evolving, digitally native brands are evolving. We're not just online. We don't only sell digitally, but we have this DNA as part of our brand that we emerged online first, and that we understand how to acquire customers online. And it's unique because a lot of, in the outdoor industry, for example, there's so many brands like, Patagonia has been around for 50 years, the North Face for 60 years, Columbia for 70 years. These are brands that didn't understand e-commerce and the digital consumer, as well as maybe small emerging brands like ours. And so it was an advantage that we had. And of course, we also start moving in the direction of some of these more traditional brands of selling through other retailers and other things. But that digital DNA is an important part of why we exist and how we compete.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that, of course, being digital and having that kind of be the beginning of your brand probably helped you all during the pandemic and everything that's been happening the past couple of years. Can you speak a little bit about just some of the challenges that your brand went through during the pandemic, but also some of the ways that, you've talked about some of the ways that your team really came together and how that inspired you as well?
Yeah. So I'm sure everyone's really exhausted of talking about, the pandemic, right? But, there were some really great lessons learned during these last couple of years. And, for us, our revenue was cut in half in March. So instantly, the first impact, interestingly, was e-commerce. It was like, that's where we saw the first signs of softening, and we knew something was happening. This was in the first week of March. Our e-commerce sales started sliding. And then, by March 13th, we closed our retail stores. Many of our retail partners closed their stores. And a lot of our corporate partners that were buying product, jackets or bags for their corporate events or for their teams, many of them started coming to us saying, hey, we want to cancel that order. And it was terrifying. I was very nervous. And, but we met on March 16th, Monday. I had an all hands meeting, our first virtual meeting. And I told our team, I basically outlined a plan of how we were going to get out of this. And it involved everyone taking some collective sacrifices, but we all rallied together to protect each other and our team. I invited everyone to innovate and to think of ways that we could double down on our mission. I made a commitment that every dollar that we'd made in commitment to giving back would go to giving back. We would never use those dollars to support the business. Even in a crisis, like I felt that was very important. And I said, let's find now a time, like in this crisis, this is the time where we can show our true colors. And let's give back more now than we ever have. And we actually gave, in 2020, we gave 3 times our commitment. We commit to 1% of revenues. We gave 3%. We gave every dollar that we could to giving back and to supporting our community. And because of that, we ended up seeing a really great response from consumers. In Q3, the most outdoor brands that we have data for, which most, a lot of the public brands, they grew 2% year over year in Q3 of 2020 compared to Q3 of 2019. And that was like their first up quarter. Q2 was really down for most of these brands. Q2, we were flat somehow. And then in Q3, we grew 96% over the previous year. Since the beginning of the pandemic, our revenues are about 4 times bigger than they were. And this is more growth than our industry has seen, but it's because I believe we've been so committed to our social mission and that people feel that connection to that. So, I'm really proud of the response that we had during a really challenging time. Really proud of the team and how we rallied together. And we made some big changes, some really big changes in the business and how we operate because of COVID as well.
Yeah, I love that, how you talk about how perhaps, the growth that you all have seen is connected to just consumers thinking more about the companies that they're invested in and what those companies' values are. I think that's absolutely, probably contributed to the success that you all have had despite, everything that's going on. Somebody asked a great question, and I should say, if folks aren't familiar with the Cotopaxi products. I guarantee you've seen people walking around in brightly colored jackets and backpacks that have the little llama logo on them. They do have some really, really cool products. We have a store here in San Francisco. And so John Graydon asks, why did you choose apparel as your business model? And, you know, why did you choose that as kind of the vehicle to give back?
Yeah. So a few thoughts on that. Number one, I did what I knew and understood, which I hadn't built an apparel brand, but I understood e-commerce. And so I kind of gravitated towards the idea of building a brand that I understood. As someone who loves the outdoors and loves adventure, this is a category that I'd always had some interest in. And I felt there was an opportunity to build something that really scaled. I knew that if I wanted to build something that could truly impact poverty and truly help eradicate poverty, I needed to be able to build something that could really be big, like $1 billion business or bigger. And so I felt in this category, while it's very crowded, the outdoor industry has so many brands, and a lot of investors didn't invest in us because of that. They felt it was, a very challenging category. I felt there was an opportunity to go build a brand differently. And so, that was kind of why I chose this category. When we launched the business, we launched with 5 backpacks. We didn't have any apparel to start. And then about 6 months later, we launched our first 5 jackets. And so we kind of gravitated towards packs and outerwear for a couple different reasons. E-commerce is challenging when you have a fit issue. So for example, shoes, e-commerce shoe companies really struggle, and there's some big ones that have emerged, but they're challenging because like shoes, the fit can be really challenging, or even bottoms can be a challenging business because people have unique fits. They want it to fit right. Where backpacks, they're made to fit any body type. They can adjust, and so the return rates I knew would be a lot lower. Outerwear, if you have a jacket, you kind of know if your size is maybe small, medium, large, extra large, double extra large, you kind of know your general size. And so return rates I knew would be a lot lower. So that's one of the reasons also I kind of gravitated towards these categories that maybe fit wouldn't be as quite a challenge as it maybe is for some other products.
Nice. I like that. And I know that your first company you started before Cotopaxi was an apparel company too. So yeah, like you said, that was an industry you knew. And I wouldn't have even thought about the fit challenges, but that's absolutely a concern for anyone who orders things online is, oh, am I going to have to return this? Great. Well, I know we're at time for this section. I think I probably need to kick it over to Carrie again.
Yeah, thank you both so much. It's been a great chat. I love listening in from the corner here. Just a quick reminder to the audience, don't forget to use the Q&A button, the widget, for any questions for the presenters. And we'll get moving into our next session here. We've got a second keynote of the day. I'd like to welcome Isabella Chia, the EVP Managing Director of Field and Farmer. Hi, Isabella. Oh, there she is.
Hi there. Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute and get technology started. So
technology is always the most fun.
Exactly. Well, it's so nice to be here. And I also noticed that my background didn't actually appear correctly. Oh. So there you go. There's technology.
Well, there you go. Well, I will let you take it away. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. All right, I'm going to now share my screen. So bear with me for 1 second. Let's see. There you go. All right, there we go. Okay, can you guys all see my screen? Carrie, could you just give me a cue to see if my
screen share is working? You are all okay, good to
great.
go.
Thanks so much. All right, thank you. All right, well, so my name is Isabella, and before we dive into actually our own POV on Brands Doing Good, let me just kind of share a little bit about us as the Fresh Factory and Field and Farmer. First of all, it was just really inspiring to hear what Davis just shared about Cotopaxi, on their journey, on his multiple journeys, actually even before this main brand that he's worked to build. But for us as the Fresh Factory, we are more of an emerging side of the brand and the business. So I do want to take some time to share with you who we are, what we're all about, before we get into how we're actually thinking about doing good as a company. So at the Fresh Factory, we're a mission-driven platform. And what we mean by that is we want to build, and we have built, a platform to really build and incubate the future of food and beverage. So what does that mean, and how do we define the future of food and bev? It actually, for us, is three things. It's clean label, fresh ingredients, and plant-based. And to that end, we've built a vertically integrated platform from the farm to the shelf with the goal of providing honest food for all. And just today, 21,000 people would have had a product we made, and we're just getting started. So how does the Fresh Factory kind of relate to Field and Farmer? Which company is it that we're talking about? So let me just kind of break it down for you here. The Fresh Factory is actually, again, as I mentioned, a platform to build and scale future food and beverage brands. And within that, we've got two pillars. The first pillar is really the service side, where we really want to be that partner that helps small brands provide services all the way from innovation R&D to manufacturing, supply chain, all the way to sales and marketing. On the second pillar, we actually fully own and operate two brands ourselves. It's Field and Farmer and Element Press. So today, I really want to share with you how we bring to life our mission of doing good through the lens of Field and Farmer, our flagship brand. So to give you a little bit of background on ourselves as a Field and Farmer brand, I really have to go back to the early days on how we were started. So we've always been focused on fresh produce as a brand and as a company. So in 2011, what you see on the left-hand side, we actually started out as an urban farm, a vertically integrated urban farm in Chicago. And we were at that time one of the largest indoor vertical farm in the US. We also saw the opportunity as we were growing and selling herbs and vegetables, an opportunity to utilize our scraps as well as any bruised basil to actually make it into something that consumers can use and ourselves can enjoy, which today remains our best seller, our sweet basil dressing and marinade. However, we actually did eventually close down our vertical farm just due to the fact that we wanted to focus more on how do we bring this in a scalable way to more people. And we really felt that at that time in 2011, we were a bit too early for the market. So what we did was we actually then tapped into, not only actually tapped into a need of consumers wanting fresh produce, through our basil dressing, but we actually knew that we had an opportunity to also give consumers what they really wanted, which is crave-worthy favorites from stuff that they grew up with, America's favorite dressing, ranch. So you see that we strive to do just that by providing all the ingredients that they recognize, but in a flavor that they really crave. And really today, this has inspired a broader mission to reclaim that indulgence through all the categories that we play in. Not only is it in fresh condiments, such as dressings, marinades, and dips, but also through indulgent sweet treats, like a peanut butter cookie refrigerated snack bar. So now that you know a little bit more about Field and Farmer as well as Fresh Factory, I'm going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to have a brand doing good beyond just providing good tasting product with clean ingredients, and really from the perspective of a really emerging and a small brand. So here's our 4 cents on doing that. Kind of similar to what you heard earlier from Davis, it really does start from the inside out, and it has to start from the beginning. What you see here are pictures of 2 of our co-founders, Nate Laurel as well as Bill Bessenhofer of the Fresh Factory. So Nate and Bill, they've been partners and entrepreneurs together for over 20 years, working on mission-driven businesses within renewable energy as well as in food. And like a scene out of a movie, one night, literally Nate and Bill were at a restaurant, kind of mapping out and dreaming out what they could do to actually build and change the future of food. And they did just that on a napkin. So through the discussion, they actually thought, okay, well, we know, and they saw that a lot of the growth that was happening in food and beverage came from smaller brands. Just on an annual basis, there are more than 20,000 new products that are launched by small brands. On the other hand, we also know, they also knew at the time that a lot of these small brands just did not have the resources, nor the infrastructure, nor the know-how to how to start, let alone succeed. And on the third piece of that is, as they thought about like what consumers really wanted, which again was fresh, they want clean label and really plant-based, there really was no major player in the marketplace that did just that. So really, it was really thinking about, what was driving food and beverage, plus the unmet need that really came to grow and birth the concept of the Fresh Factory. And because of sort of the genesis of this idea, as well as what Nate and Bill really wanted to kind of dream up, they also wanted to make sure that this company was not just about producing things to make you, feel good, eating good, but ultimately about doing good as well. So really, that's why from the beginning, we structured this company as a public benefits company, which, as you heard earlier, it's about balancing not just the profit, but also people and planet from the beginning. The second piece, the second cent, I guess, is really focusing on the actions, big and the small, and to just start. I think as a small brand, as a small company, sometimes it's really easy for myself to actually feel inertia or feel paralyzed, that I really can't make a big impact. That a little thing that I do is maybe a drop in the bucket. And I think that the thing that really we have to remember and that we have to tell ourselves is that every dollar that we donate, every apple that we reuse is one waste diverted and it's one life impacted. So that's how we keep ourselves sort of grounded and motivated to do what we do every day. So where does that actually all start and begin? Well, the first thing is actually for us being clear on what is ultimately our vision as a company and as a brand. And for us, our vision is that we see a world where you can eat good and do good. But guess what? That's not enough for us. It needs to be easy. Because if it's not easy, there are way too many reasons why you shouldn't do that. Secondly, once you have the vision, what we then did as a team was really try to figure out, okay, well, at the core of who we are as people and as a company, what do we believe in, as people, as human beings? And we believe in equity and responsibility. And from there, we actually then rolled out the 4 pillars of how we bring this to life as a company through the lens of our values, equity and responsibility. So I'm going to go through each one of these pillars and then share with you just the small steps and the simple ways that we are trying to make a difference in these ways. So the first one, because we're in food, is all about food access and equity. We believe that everyone should have access to clean and fresh foods. B, we started out as an urban farm and we continue to work and partner with small farms. And we believe in land equity. So really here, we really want to honor and protect BIPOC land rights because we feel like we have a responsibility to also support under-resourced, under-leveraged people and groups. C, we believe in a fully participatory and functioning democracy because without that, then why are we even all here? So in that vein, we fully support voting rights as a company. And then D, we believe that everyone has a responsibility to step up and save our planet. Again, every dollar counts, every apple reused is one waste diverted. So as it comes to life, we believe in supporting animal rights, being a zero food waste company, striving to be carbon neutral, and using recyclable packaging when we can. And the 2 things that really underpin all of this and make it happen is first and foremost our community, our people. There is no way any of this is possible without the people who work at Food and Farmer as well as at the Fresh Factory. And the second is our farmer partners that we work with. who share the same values that we have, who prioritize people, planet, in addition to actually profit, who put that extra care into growing their crop for us. And then of course, monetarily, we donate 1% of all our sales to support the values and initiatives that I've mentioned above. Now, admittedly, we haven't always been profitable, but we continue nonetheless to donate to support these causes on a monthly basis. So, we know our people is at the heart of everything that we do. We believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, where as a company, we have 84% of our employees are people of color. We also believe in giving people second chances, where we have hired and are open to hiring people with criminal records. We also are really proud to pay above the already high minimum wage of Chicago and want to increase that as we grow, because we believe, again, that none of this is possible without our community and our people. And just a little bit on our small farmer partners here. These two, Alex as well as Fran, are two small farm partners that we've partnered with from the start at Field and Farmer for over 4 years. Alex is a key partner of ours that helps us not only become a zero waste facility through helping us work through our composting and taking and reusing our food scraps and waste, but also is our partner in terms of providing us with really carefully grown wheatgrass that we utilize in our cold pressed juices. Fran is actually a 6th generation farmer outside of Michigan. She is hailed as the bean queen of Michigan and puts the extra care in her cannellini beans that we use as the base of our creamy dressings and dips. And now I'm going to share a little bit more about Fran and her perspective on actually utilizing her dips to bring more healthy food to everyone.
Basically till 1880 with my great-great-grandparents. Our main goal is to grow the perfect bean. We love growing dry beans, which is beans like kidney beans, cranberry beans, navy beans, and white kidneys or cannellini beans. I was actually on the Michigan Bean Commission, and I was promoting our own beans. Hey, Isabella, I can share the video for you so that the sound works.
Okay, that would be great.
Why do we do this as farmers? It's just in the farmer's blood. We've been in business basically since 1880 with my great-great-grandparents. Our main goal is to grow the perfect bean. We love growing dry beans, which is beans like kidney beans, cranberry beans, navy beans, and white kidneys or cannellini beans. I was actually on the Michigan Bean Commission, and I've been promoting our own beans 20 plus years. And my goal was to get our beans into a hummus-type product because beans are one of the healthiest type foods that you can eat. So my work has been trying to convince someone to put beans into dips. And today I taste it like the best I've ever had. So I am just so excited. It's like my dream come true.
Well, she's kind of fabulous.
Yeah, thanks so much for playing that video. Yeah, she is not only fabulous, she's humble, she's the bean queen, and she makes a mean bean. So, so we love working with Fran.
Well, we're gonna bring in another awesome person here with your moderator to kind of keep going into our session, and we're gonna bring out Ashley Scorpio to go over some more questions with you. She's the VP of Partnerships at Hawk Media.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. And what a wonderful presentation. I also love that we ended on that note with the Bean Queen. What a fun, I guess, honorific title. So very cool. I'm sure we'll have time to take some questions from the audience, but I think a great way to continue the conversation would be if you want to share with us more about, beyond what you covered in the presentation, about your vision for the future of food.
Yeah, it's a great question, Ashley. So from my perspective, and really our perspective at Field and Farmer and the Fresh Factory, we believe that the future of food from a pure, food attribute standpoint is still in fresh, clean, and plant-based. And not only is it what consumers want, it's also what's most humane and environmentally friendly for our planet. But now with that being said, though, in terms of how consumers consume and how we actually go about doing it, I think that's where there's a lot of interesting sort of evolution in the next coming years. So I think as consumers, through COVID, through the lockdown, as well as kind of being spoiled with really good food, especially I would say in our country here, I think there's a demand for even tastier food, like restaurant quality food, but actually even more convenient, meaning that I want to eat like what I would have had at a restaurant, but I want it to be, I don't want to really spend a lot of time making it, right? So convenience becomes an even higher order benefit for all of us as consumers. And I definitely can relate to that on a day-to-day standpoint. So I think food as a service is something that is really interesting to think about as a company. If you're in food, like how can we actually give consumers these solutions that they want? So for us as Field and Farmer, instead of just providing, crave-worthy favorites such as a ranch dressing or a buffalo dip, what is that next evolution of a clean, fresh meal for them that they can get from a restaurant straight to their home? And what's really exciting to me about this is there's really, from a service standpoint, there's really no clear winner in fresh food today, which is why we're so excited at the Fresh Factory, because it is our mission to build the next platform of brands, but also of service to enable that.
Awesome. Yeah, I believe it was Hippocrates who said, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. So obviously when you're here talking about fresh, functional, healthy foods, I think that's something that we don't do enough in North America. We arguably have one of the world's worst diets in the US compared to other countries. So I think it's so important that, to your point, there are these fresh, convenient, healthy options for people that want to fuel themselves the right way. What other than, these amazing suppliers that you're working with, and there's so many different moving pieces to a business, can you tell us a little bit more about what a surprising challenge might be in your current industry that you perhaps didn't anticipate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the things that really surprised me coming in to this role and this company, as I sought to, kind of figure out how do we actually become more sustainable as a company via recyclable packaging, or just even utilizing not only making it recyclable, but actually reusing recyclable packaging. It was actually really surprising to me that there is not only a lack of infrastructure available for that from a sourcing standpoint, but also a lack of transparency in terms of who you can source from and how you source it from. So I'll give you a little anecdote on this, an example. So one of the things that we were trying to do was actually source recyclable packaging in our plastic bottles, because obviously one of the key things is, how do we actually extend the life of plastic when we do use them, right? So whether it's eliminating single use or actually utilizing recyclable in that sense. And one of the most fascinating and disappointing things that we found was one of the major suppliers that we had to work with was actually from China. So if you actually think about that, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of shipping materials over thousands of miles from a sustainability standpoint in order to then, in the States, on the state side, actually be able to say, okay, well, at least from a recyclability standpoint, our carbon footprint on this end is smaller. So that actually long-term just did not work for us, because we couldn't, in our right mind, kind of justify that transportation impact that it would have on the world. So I think that still is a challenge. And it was a surprise because, I think with a lot of companies, especially Fortune 500 companies, having these sustainability goals, it's surprising that the supply side has not caught up with it yet.
Definitely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, especially in this day and age. You would think that that wouldn't be so challenging. Since you mentioned packaging, recycled packaging, and sustainability, and you also touched on this, of course, within your presentation itself, can you talk a little bit more about how you laid the foundation for not only sustainability, but also diversity into your business practices and your business model?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the, I think, as I mentioned in the presentation, one of the key first steps in the foundation was actually just making sure that that's a key belief that you share from the start. So whether it's the founders, who kind of write that or kind of instill that, or just a team, a management team that does that. So I think that's absolutely key, because if you don't actually, as a team, decide what's important, you're not going to then actually know what to communicate. And in turn, no one's going to action upon that. So I think really it's a three-step process. It's decide what's important, communicate it, and action. So I think that really is the foundation. But then once you actually decide the what, defining your goals and metrics, what's important, it's then really figuring out, okay, the how. And for me, once you get that foundation, like, what's the goal for you as a company? So maybe it's carbon neutral in 3 to 5 years, right? The how piece, I think, becomes also equally challenging, given the infrastructure piece. So I think, but I think that's also the fun part of figuring it out once you have that foundation in place.
Awesome. Since you touched on this, what that might look like, let's say carbon neutrality in the next 3 to 5 years. And since we are on this topic, what do you think is the future of sustainability in business overall?
Yeah, so I think the future of sustainability, I think it's easy. It's kind of natural, I guess, for me to say from my standpoint, given that we are, a smaller company, is that it is going from just a single-minded individual or single company vision and mission to actually collective ownership across companies. I think that really is the future, because we can't possibly accomplish this as one small company, let alone one country. It is a global issue, and I think that is the future. But again, the devil's going to be in the details on like how we can actually collaborate and systemically change together to do this. So of course, I don't have all the answers, but I do think that is how we need to, as business leaders, need to start thinking about making an impact differently.
Awesome. Building on this further, this seems to be resonating with the audience. We have a follow-up question on this from the audience. How is your sustainability messaging impacting your choice of media mix, and what is resonating with your client, your target customers, your target audience?
Yeah. So from a media mix standpoint, I will say, because we are a small brand, 99% of our media is going to be within digital. But in terms of messaging mix, what I will say about that is, it's interesting what kind of Davis said earlier about the balance of purpose as well as product messaging. I think for us, how we think about it is, or how I think about it is, we're a food brand, which means we're extremely low consideration for the most part, right? Highly switchable, less loyalty than a clothing apparel type of a brand. So with that being said, from a messaging standpoint, first and foremost, if our product and our packaging is not screaming taste because we are food, then we failed, number one. And we absolutely need the product to win so that we can be profitable to fuel the investments we put behind purpose and sustainability. So from a messaging standpoint, for the most part, we actually treat those pretty discreetly, just so we're not we're keeping our messaging single-minded. So for example, on our Instagram or within our social media, we will for the most part, talk about our products as having crave-worthy flavors made from plants. And then we'll also, on a monthly basis or a time-relevant basis, talk about, like an Earth Day, talk about the impact we've made, to date as a company in terms of using, saving however many ugly produce. However, I think in terms of then a digital media mix, right? Like I think on the website as well as within our email mix, that's where we can start to kind of intertwine and combine those two stories together because we've got more space and a more captive audience at that point.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Building on that further beyond sustainability, what other trends in e-commerce and retail are you most interested in?
This kind of goes back to your first question, Ashley, on the vision and future of food, and I mentioned food as a service. So I think that technology, technology meaning digital, enabling e-commerce in general, can actually enable many things for the consumer at the end of the day. What I'm actually most excited about is how e-commerce enables really companies to be able to deliver a food as a service. So I think a lot about brands like Daily Harvest, where you don't have the time, know-how, or interest in wanting to learn how to cook, so you can eat healthy and it's the full solution to you, and you never have to actually cook and you can still eat healthy. So I think that's really interesting in terms of being able to provide solutions really quickly and fresh solutions nonetheless. I also think about e-commerce with being able to connect you directly with the consumer more deeply, which actually as a food brand is very exciting because I mentioned just earlier that it's really difficult for a low consideration type of a category and a product to really deepen that relationship. And I think e-commerce has opened that up for us.
Awesome. Not to get controversial here, but given even the headline that we are all under here today, brands doing good, right? I wanted to dig into that a little more. And there has been a debate in the broader community online, on LinkedIn, all over the place. Does doing good even matter at all in business?
That's a great question. And I think I'll offer my personal perspective on this one. So I think the answer that most people will expect me to say and will expect to hear is, yes, absolutely. That's what consumers expect. And I will say I agree with that half-heartedly. And the reason why I say that is because unless you as a company and as a people team are committed to actually executing the good that you aspire to do, you're better off as a brand and company not doing it and just focus on selling your product or service. So I say doing good matters if you truly are built like that from the inside and out and you're committed. But if not, then just own it, be transparent with yourself, I think most importantly, so that you can just own it and be happy with that with your consumers and retailers.
Touching on that about owning it, right? And also based on something you said earlier about the future of sustainability in business and that collective ownership, we did have a follow-up from the audience on that. Are you finding that brands in your space understand the importance of collective ownership?
I think it's a nice term right now. I think everyone will nod their head when we say, yes, this is a collective effort. Everyone needs to work together towards it. I think what everyone struggles with is really the how and who takes that first step. Is it really the big company's job? Is it the smaller company's job because they're built right from the start? So I think that's where I think it's still a nascent, nice thought that has still yet to be fully realized.
That makes sense to me. Hopefully that is the direction that we are all collectively moving in together, even if we're not quite there yet. We did have another question from the audience as well. More broadly, it seems about your marketing tactics and strategies. How are you balancing the importance of ROAS, your return on ad spend, and your brand metrics?
That's a great question on objectives here. So I would say that for a brand our size, a bulk of our spend is actually not, it's not easy to measure ROAS. And it's not to say sales are important, because they absolutely are, especially, as we're trying to scale and build. But ultimately, what the main metric that I look at is actually, if I can, trial and repeat, which basically is a breakdown of velocity, is our in-store velocity. And to me, that's an indication of brand health, more so than the brand metrics piece. Because from a trial standpoint, what that validates for me is my proposition actually reaching the right audience, and is it attractive enough? And from a repeat, is my product actually delivering what I'm claiming, it is? So I think those two pieces is one that I look at obsessively to make sure that we are on the right track across the metrics. And the reason why, again, just to kind of go back to the question more specifically, the reason why I don't look at ROAS again more specifically is because I don't have those metrics for a lot of the efforts that I have, such as PR and some of the organic things that I do.
That makes a lot of sense. Since we have talked a little bit about audiences, we've talked a little bit about the collective will of the room, if you will. I'm also very curious more broadly about community. We are both over here at Hawk Media and on your side at Fresh Factory Field and Farmer. We're all part of Food Borough, the Food Borough community, for example. What would you say, participating in or being part of different communities, how does that help your business, if in any markable ways, whether it's Food Borough or other communities? What are perhaps the key benefits for any other brands in business, and how might they benefit from seeking out that support network, perhaps strategic partnerships, et cetera?
Ashley, I really like how you kind of led the question with collective ownership, because that's exactly how I feel about running and operating this brand. This is a collective effort on behalf of all food brands, in my opinion, that we're trying to change the future of food and beverage. It is not just the Fresh Factory's mission. It is hundreds and thousands of food entrepreneurs and brands, and even Fortune 500 companies. So, we can't do it all alone, and we shouldn't be. And I find that actually being a part of specific communities, so whether it's Food Borough, whether it's within LinkedIn, and whether it's a Facebook group, for example, that I'm a part of, it is actually hearing these stories amongst my fellow food cronies, if you will, that actually drive and motivate me, because I know that my impact, despite it being small in the grand scheme of things, is actually contributing towards a larger food movement.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. Is there an opportunity here? We do have some other brands in the room for further collaboration, perhaps. And if so, what would be the best way to approach a brand or business like yours to consider collaboration or to engage with you in that way?
Yeah, I am always open to collaborate and engage in conversation. So feel free to direct DM us on Instagram, find me on LinkedIn, or email me at isabella@fieldandfarmer.co.
Awesome. Since you mentioned Instagram, I'm very interested. There have been a lot of shifts across social media platforms, in particular in the last year, in vis-a-vis primarily a lot of the privacy motivated changes with app tracking transparency, which has led to a degradation in cookies and tracking, and oftentimes personalization. This has primarily affected the paid output on social, but we all know that the social platforms behave differently across the board in demographics, just generally speaking. Which social platforms have you seen the most success on reaching your audience? It sounds like Instagram. Are there perhaps any other standouts?
Yeah, so I say Instagram because that's been the channel that we focused on most, and since the beginning as a company, even before I joined. So we've owned our own handle on Instagram for 4+ years before the rise of TikTok, as well as even I think LinkedIn becoming an even more social type of a platform. What I will say is Instagram is still great for engaging with your existing consumer base, and having a visually it's great for kind of communicating visually with your audience. What I will say, so I would say that works in that sense. I will also say that LinkedIn is actually becoming more of a tool that we're trying to use. I will say we're not all the way there yet, but we're trying to use to actually engage more so from a industry standpoint, to share amongst peers, even retailers and consumers, even on Instagram, on what we are all about as a company. I think LinkedIn is a great way to actually tell our story, tell our purpose, more so than our website to a certain extent. So I think that's a key channel that we want to use more. And TikTok as well. We just started utilizing TikTok to reach the Gen Zs. My stepson has used it since over 4 years ago. I never understood it. So you won't be seeing me posting anything on there soon, although I'd love a challenge, I guess. But I will say that that's something that we know that people want to see who's who behind the company. They want to see the behind the scenes. And I think we've started to experiment there, and we've actually seen the most success from an engagement standpoint, and through actually organic shares on TikTok. So I don't think we've got it figured out in terms of magic formula, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity for us to engage our consumers there.
Awesome. Since we are talking about doing good today and giving back, and you did outline a lot of this in your presentation as well, can you tell us more about the donations that you all provide? I know that in your slides, you had mentioned 1%, where and how does the team determine where those go? Is it sort of a collective conversation you all have internally? Do you have existing partnerships with specific charities that you're working with? How does that process look?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of our other co-founder partners, Chris, she has been leading our Give Back program for the past few years, and she herself, we're based in Chicago and the Chicagoland area. So we have, through the values and the pillars that I shared with you, she has, developed great relationships with a lot of local area charities, with the filters of, as I talk about food access, as I talk about land rights and things like that, with an emphasis on how can we actually first start with supporting our local backyard. So some of these organizations are things like supporting cruelty-free You and Me, which is a Chicago area nonprofit to give the underserved and under-resourced better access to food. So I would say, first and foremost, is looking at under-leveraged, under-resourced areas in our backyard. I would also say that when it makes sense, such as things like supporting voting rights and things like that, of course, there are ongoing organizations that we continue to donate to, because there are just established ones that make sense for us. One of the first things that I kind of thought about and contemplated when I first came on was, do we just focus on doing one, like partner with one charity or two, right? Because that's definitely a lot easier to manage, and probably fewer logos we have to put on our website, and just fewer touch points. But at the end of the day, I think it makes sense for us as a company, given the pillars and the values and the organizations that we want to support.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Audience, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now so that we can address them for you. I was very curious, we are coming up towards our time, so we do have a bit of time to take some questions from the audience as mentioned. But one thing I was also curious to know, beyond everything you shared with us today, are there any announcements or exciting news that you can maybe give us a sneak peek on?
So, we actually, one of the things that I mentioned earlier today was as I talked about the evolution of us as a field and farmer brand, we really tried to evolve our taste profile to be really anchored on America's favorites, like the ranch dressing. And as such, we've actually are releasing our optimized and updated ranch dressing and dip in time for National Ranch Day next week. We actually were a Nexty finalist with that new formula, so we're excited about that. We believe that it stands up next to Hidden Valley. We've also done the same with all of our dips in terms of elevating all of those products to make sure that it tastes as good as the real dairy version of those counterparts. And then also we're excited to share that next Sunday, the 13th, we're going to be part of the first ever virtual farmers market in the metaverse called the Meta Market. So please find me on LinkedIn or find us on LinkedIn or Instagram, and come find out more details on how you can participate in that meta market next Sunday. There will be steep discounts. And I think more importantly, it's an interesting way to kind of learn how we can actually build experiences in the virtual world.
Yeah, definitely. That's a lot of fun. I think that is hosted by Parade, who's a mutual partner. So I will also go ahead and drop a link in the chat for anyone who wants to join us there. And obviously, it's another great way for them to engage with you and Fresh Factory and Field and Farmer. We are coming up close on time. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think would be important for other brands to know who are here in the audience today?
Yeah, I think one of the I think one of the last things that I'll just mention here is that at the end of the day, doing good, even if starting out as a public benefits corporation or a B certified company wasn't how you were structured as a team or as a brand, I think I think there's still, like as even Davis mentioned in the earlier talk, there are still ways to actually go back and kind of rethink what your true values are as a company and see what actions you can take to slowly chip away at that. And all to say that, we believe it's a journey. As I mentioned, we're not yet utilizing fully recyclable packaging. We're not carbon neutral yet, but I think most importantly, it's important to be transparent and honest with yourself and with your consumers, and be okay with it as a company that it's going to be difficult, it will be costly, but you're doing it because you believe in your grander mission. And for us, it's about doing good in addition to actually enabling you to eat good.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense to me. Appreciate your time today and your thoughts and for being here with us. I hope everyone here got some great value from your insights.
Thanks so much, Ashley.
Thank you both for joining us. I actually just got my ticket for the Meta Market when you shared that link. I'm very excited.
Well, I can't wait to see you there, Carrie.
As a Wisconsin girl, I'm very ashamed I did not know there was National Ranch Day. I feel like I've let my state down, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
It's never too late.
That's right. But thank you both for joining. This is a great chat. We're gonna switch over to our next session here. We'll bring on our speaker, Nilukshi De Silva, the head of digital marketing and content strategy at Coty, and as well as our moderator, who is Laura Riegert, the team CPG leader for top accounts at Google. We'll give everybody just a second. Hey there. Oh, you're both still muted.
Can you hear me now?
I can. All right. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to hop off and watch from backstage.
Hey, Nilukshi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Laura?
Good, good. How's the baby?
She's good. She's quiet right now, so I'm excited to be a part of this lovely event and have a chat with you.
Yeah, same. This is going to be really a really good conversation. I just, like I said, I can't believe how good you look and how refreshed you are with a brand new baby. So, cheers to you. I'm positive I did not look like that. So
thank you.
And everybody's good.
Yeah, so far so good. Thank you.
So first of all, let me start by saying congratulations for being named Brand Innovators 2021 Women to Watch. What does that mean? Like, what does that mean to you when you get an award like that or a nominee?
I think, first of all, I love this community. I've had the privilege to be a part of it from a panelist perspective, as well as an attendee joining various different events and conferences and talks. And I think for me, what's really great about a platform like this is the ability to bring people together from all facets of the marketing digital world, and also to be recognized as a leader in the space. I'm continuing to grow myself, and I think being able to help contribute towards the journey that I'm having, and also to inspire people. That's something that I think this organization is so good at doing, and then also being able to consistently learn, right? I think we as marketers, especially in the digital space, that's consistently, what's consistent is change. And it's always evolving. And I love the ability to tap into people outside of my expertise and my genre and my categories, and learn from as well. And that's another thing that a platform like Brand Innovators is doing. And this session and the session that we just saw as well is so fantastic. And so I think those are some of the things that I'm really, really, grateful for. And also as a person of color, a woman of color, I think it goes without saying that there aren't a lot of us in leadership roles, and there aren't a lot of us that are always recognized as well. So I think that's something, again, this platform really it helps celebrate. So I think, I think those are some really good reasons.
That's incredible. So kind of, you kind of alluded to this in your answer, but you kind of mentioned your path and your journey. Tell us your backstory. What's your path to, what has been your path to eventually become the head of digital content and strategy for Calvin Klein? Sorry for the background noise. Of course, they're cutting the grass now.
No
I don't know if you can hear anything, but what was your journey to get here? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. A lot of people actually, I don't think, knows this about me. I grew up outside of the US. I grew up in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, predominantly. And this is a country that had a 20-year civil war. So I actually grew up in that kind of environment as well. I had always wanted to study in the US, and I was able to study at a liberal arts college. So somewhat traditional background in that sense in New England. And I absolutely loved my education. But I was always really gravitating towards, understanding what makes people tick, the psychology behind, why people are gravitating towards brands or certain messaging. And that's what ultimately led me to have a career in digital marketing. And I've, of course, had the privilege of working across some really fantastic brands, Urban Decay for one, Bare Minerals, as well as now, of course, leading global digital and content strategy for the very iconic Calvin Klein fragrances pillar. But I think my background growing up in Sri Lanka and also being an immigrant here has really helped me, I think, understand what it's like to work in this kind of multicultural setting and have that lens when I'm approaching and developing global campaigns. And I think also it's really just, helped inspire, I think, who I am and appreciate my journey even more, even for my own self. Because sometimes, you forget what, some of the, like, your foundation and, your journey, because you're kind of really busy and you're going about your life. Like, I just had a baby. But when you stop and think about it, it's kind of crazy to think, I grew up in this like really tiny little island that, had the Civil War, and there was, all of that chaos, and now I'm here. So in New York, and it's pretty cool.
So I'm guessing your major was not marketing then.
My major was not marketing. I went to a liberal arts school, and so we actually didn't really have any of the business degrees. I was a history major, and I studied Oh yeah, very cool.
Funny.
Yeah, I studied politics and international relations and economics. All of those kinds of subjects that you do in a liberal arts education setting. Uh-oh, I think I lost Laura.
All right, I'm back.
Hi. No
As
worries.
it'll flip in and out. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
I do think that there's something to be said for the liberal arts degrees in being in a position of leadership, because I think that there's something that we learn there that's just sort of bigger than the problem or bigger than the role. So I find that just a fascinating, unique step in the process. Very cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I would have to agree. Really great foundation.
Okay, so moving on to the topic of sustainability, that's a really broad topic. It can cover everything from packaging to ingredients to emissions. So first, wearing the Coty hat, which is obviously the parent company of your product, how does your organization tackle sustainability, and how do you, as part of Coty, prioritize where to take action?
Yeah, of course. So like so many other organizations, Coty is a beauty organization. So we have a fragrance arm, which is what I'm part of, and we develop all of the fragrances for Calvin Klein, and we manage the end-to-end process there. And we also have other brands like CoverGirl that just were certified from a cruelty-free, clean perspective. So I think Coty, like so many other brands and large organizations, are really trying to do good, and all of our product marketing teams, or sustainability, and even the digital, like every single person, we are under the umbrella of an initiative that was recently launched in 2020 called Beauty That Lasts. And what this effort is really is trying to, one, educate the industry, educate us internally, and hold all of us accountable as we go about our daily lives, and touch all of the various different facets from a digital marketing, product development perspective. And this effort, Beauty That Lasts, there's like 3 pillars that Coty is really focusing on. One is the beauty of our products. So really, how are we manufacturing? How are we sourcing our ingredients? So for example, from a Calvin Klein perspective, we source our ingredients are all sustainable. We recently launched a fragrance called CK Everyone, which is sort of the fragrance that is geared towards the Gen Zs under our CK1 umbrella, which I think many of you are very familiar with because it's an icon since the 90s. This was the first vegan fragrance in the industry. Our packaging is recyclable. So the bottle, all of that, you can recycle, and we, as marketers, like communicate that type of messaging as well. So those are ways that we're really looking to help contribute and really support sustainability. The other piece of this is the beauty of the planet. So how do we give back? How do we source these ingredients and give back to the communities? And then the beauty of our people, which is really all of the new DE&I efforts that Coty as an organization is launching and really pledging towards developing and building towards. And so for one, from a fragrance perspective, for example, one pledge is how can we use ethanol sourced from carbon capture? And that's something that we're pledging towards using up until like 2023. So those are some of the ways that Coty is really trying to push this initiative. And those are sort of the big 3 pillars. The corporation is really holding all of us accountable, and we have a lot of internal checklists and as well.
So you build your priorities around those 3 pillars and then take it into how fragrances fit into that.
Exactly.
Cool. And how does inclusivity fit on your team? Where does that fall?
So that's a big word. And I think, and I look at it in a couple of different ways specifically, right? I mean, inclusivity is also, in all senses of the word, like, how are you looking to build a team that's a little bit different from you? Whether it's, diversity of thought, whether it's, did I lose Laura? I might have lost Laura, but I will keep speaking until she's back. So it's about, developing people and bringing people onto your team that have a different background, that are from a cultural perspective, education perspective. And that's how I look at building and developing a team as well, because that's when you can do some of the best work. Digital is a really creative, way of thinking, right? And we're always trying to develop new ideas. And so you want someone on your team that can challenge you, that solve problems differently than you. So I think those are some of the ways that I think I look at inclusivity. And then aside from, the traditional sense that I think we're all very aware of and trying to do more of. And then I think also as a woman of color, as a person of color, there's a lot of mentorship that we're speaking about. There's a lot of DE&I efforts. There's a lot of ERGs that are established in corporations. There's mentorship programs. But I think one of the things that I've learned is there's a lot of mentorship, which I'm very grateful for. And I have mentors. I am a mentor. But women of color and people of color are, over-mentored and under-sponsored. And I think that's something that I'm really passionate about communicating, and also making sure, especially younger people that are starting to develop their careers, really understand the difference. And, I have a lot of love and respect for my mentors, and I've learned so much, and I still have people that I call up and, get advice. But there's a difference between being a mentor and mentorship and sponsorship. And what I mean by that is, a sponsor is someone that you have at your work that can advocate for you and help you get that visibility that you don't necessarily get in your organization. They are people that are behind closed doors when certain decisions about career progression, promotions, restructure, like all of these things are happening. Those are people that can advocate for you. So for me, I think that's how I also look at inclusivity and building a team and advocating for people in your organization. I think there's so many different ways to look at it. And this is something that I think people should be mindful of when they are starting to develop their teams as well, because as a leader, you should want to have an inclusive approach and a team, but you should also want to be a sponsor to certain individuals. And I think that's something that we don't really discuss.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. How do you, so I understand the difference. Give me an example of sponsorship where that has worked, either somebody doing it for you or you doing it for someone else.
Yeah, of course. As I said before, I think it's really about aligning yourself with people that can advocate for you. So it doesn't necessarily, for example, mean it just has to be your immediate boss, because sometimes some of these larger leadership conversations can be happening and at a time when your boss isn't even in the room. It might be, to people above her. So I think it's about finding ways to get you and your work noticed internally, and finding those people that can advocate and speak up on your behalf. And I think, so for me, for example, reaching out to someone to learn more about their career, because you're running a digital campaign, right? I mean, that's what I do, and I create content, but understanding how does this affect from a P&L perspective? How does this affect from a regional aspect? So working with other regional leaders in your organization and getting them to understand what you do, so that when there comes a need, your name is sometimes thought of for the right project. And also getting yourself on those kinds of task forces and getting yourself on bigger projects and things like that. All of those come to you if people are aware of who you are and your work and can speak to you, can speak on your behalf. And sometimes it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So I think it's also about stepping out of your comfort zone, kind of like this session, doing these types of initiatives and going out of your own comfort zone to help kind of get a new skill set or learn what a different job function is and help them understand what you do. So I think there's so many different ways to do that, especially because you want to strategically map out like who are those other individuals besides your own boss that you want to advocate for you or you want to learn from. And, sometimes you might not even be in a position to have a good relationship with your boss, right? So like, you really want to be able to find other people that can have those conversations on your behalf. And I think a lot of the times, especially for women of color, people of color, a lot of lateral moves are always given out as opportunities. So you really want to find someone that can help you level up and get to that next step versus, being stagnant. And that's why we do have this conversation about why aren't there a lot of leaders in people of color as leaders in senior positions, because you have a lot of junior people that aren't nurtured and built to become leaders. And that really goes with the sponsorship piece.
Right.
So I hope that helps clarify. And
I think so. I think it be said for just people not knowing how. That's what I hear is I don't know how. Like, what am I supposed to do? Or I think people naturally say, well, I'm just going to sit here and do my job and somebody will notice me. And as opposed to sort of taking those extra steps and thinking about what they need to do in order to be noticed. Because sometimes, if all of our heads are down and we're all working, we may not notice what's happening right beside us. So.
Right, exactly. And I think it also goes back to, as a leader, you want to be an ally and you want to develop the best people that you can to be the leaders of the future. And that speaks to your leadership skills and who you are as a leader. And so that's something we all need to strive for as well. So that's why taking a step back, when you look at inclusivity on a team, there's so many different buckets to kind of fill that isn't just about, do you have, X person that's on your team because you just might not. Like, I think we're beyond that conversation now, or we should be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think we're getting closer to where we should have been a long time ago, but I agree there. And so now I'm thinking about measurement, and I don't necessarily want to talk about measurement of inclusivity because I think we kind of covered the fact that that's just checking boxes. That's not really solving problems per se. But I think that there's measurement when it comes to some of the more sustainability, ERG type initiatives. How do you measure? How do you plan on measuring that? How you're going to meet some of these goals?
Yeah, definitely. So I think when it comes to, like, as I said, like, we have certain goals that we, from a corporation standpoint, that we've set in place. Like, for example, we want to use ethanol that's sourced from carbon capture in across fragrances by 2023. Like, that's a goal as a fragrance lead that we all have to collectively help navigate. And also from a DEI effort, I think, one thing is like, how do you nurture the talent that's already in your organization? How do you fill the gaps with people that have the skill set and bring new people on board and kind of help, again, build that sort of holistic team that you might not necessarily have had. And also partaking in all of these initiatives, right? Like, we as employees have a responsibility also to have these conversations to help develop these initiatives that have been set in place and help grow those. Because it's not just the responsibility of the person that started this initiative or your HR team or what have you. Like, you as an employee you have the responsibility to build a culture that you would like for yourself as an employee, because we all go to work and spend so much time there. So that's so that's kind of how you measure. And then of course, like everyone, so I think that's how I would measure it as well, and how I would want to contribute as well.
Gotcha. All right, let's pivot to Gen Z and Millennial. I heard them talk about that on the other session too. I just find that segment is such a unique group. They've really changed some things. So my first question is, what do you think of when you hear the name?
The $1 million question. It's what we all want to crack as marketers. I think, this is a very unique group of individuals, and that's exactly what it is, right? It's about individuality. That's a lot of what the Gen Zers are navigating towards. It's about brands having causes and being really open and vocal and showing their responsibility and not just participation. And I think those are things that Gen Z cares about so much. They're also a group that I think really is looking for omnichannel shopping experience. Like, no longer are we really going through the funnel, if you will, like that purchase funnel. And so I think that's why we're all, as marketers, we're all really curious about reaching them in different ways and testing out different tactics. Like we just heard about the metaverse in the earlier session, and that's something we're all gravitating towards and trying to experiment and test and learn. We've all looked at how do we authentically partake in some of these initiatives and cultural moments that Gen Z cares about, and how are we doing good and communicating that out in a way that makes sense for this generation. It's also about being a brand that matters at the right time, because we know loyalty is not really a huge focus for this demographic. And so how are you going to communicate and be present during these moments, more or less these micro moments, if you will, that matter to this community? And we've seen that in sort of the brands that have succeeded on TikTok, for example, and they've, completely been able to transform the way they communicate and the way they, I think help kind of convert consumers, just because of how they've been able to engage with the Gen Zs. And those are some of the things that we are also trying and testing and learning with, even on the Calvin side. I mean, we're a huge, iconic brand, but we were one of the first brands, one of the first luxe beauty brands to test on Twitch and really lean into the gaming culture. That's how we launched one of our newest fragrances called Calvin Klein Defy. As I said before, we launched a fragrance that's sustainable and vegan, that's really geared towards the Gen Z demographic, with CK Everyone, and all of the creators and personalities that we partnered with really spoke to those kinds of brand codes and had those authentic messages that helped to resonate with this community. So it's about creating these experiences and communicating in it in a way, and really, as I said, not just commenting, but really sort of, walking the walk. Like, we developed brand new products, like we developed a fragrance that really helped kind of sell this narrative that we so believe in. And I think and I think that's how you communicate and you help be a part of this iconic generation's lives. And I think those are the brands and products that are succeeding.
Yeah, I think that it's fascinating. I have 3 kids that fit into the Gen Z space, and
that's right.
I'll get a Christmas present. I get a Christmas present, and all she did was go on TikTok and buy all the beauty products that were recommended and put them in a box. And that was a Christmas present, right? Of this is the best for this, this is the best for this, this is the best for this. And it was all compiled from.
I know. I think we lost Laura again. You're back.
There we go.
No worries. I heard about some Christmas presents and I wanted to know what they were.
Sorry about that. No, I was saying that she bundled up Christmas presents. She bundled up products from TikTok that, and put them in a box and created a Christmas present out of it, which I think is a fascinating way to shop, right? Is just the best of TikTok all in one like beauty package that she concocted together. So it's just a different way.
Exactly. And I think, that's a platform that lends so well to creating culture and creating these trends. And some brands are so great at understanding, what makes sense for them and their community, because you have to be cautious and not just partake in a trend or just for the sake of it, because that's also not what especially that community and that generation wants, right? Like they can tell when brands are being performative. So really having, that sort of creativity, but also with caution, that so that you kind of marry that and it makes sense for your brand. And I think those are the brands that tend to do well. So, and I think that's probably what ended up in your Christmas present.
Right, is what bubbles to the top.
Yeah.
So do you use things like Google Trends and some of the search habits that your buyers, you can see where, Google search is up on animal products and safety and all of those trends. Do you leverage that when you're making some decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, beauty is probably one of the categories that is very trend focused, right? From a product development perspective as well. And not just in your brand messaging, but your product itself is developed through like looking at various different trends on a global scale. And it goes, hand in hand with then how do you develop that messaging and like what are people talking about and what tends to resonate best. And then also who do you partner with, like from a creator perspective as well, and various other talent, and even down to some of the tactical things, right? Like we send product mailers, for example, and how do you make those sustainable and live our brand values as well. So like creating those kinds of moments that help sort of really push that narrative further, and really embody what your brand DNA is and what you really are sort of, saying that you stand for as a brand. And that's really what I meant by like walking the walk. So like being able to like really back it up with various different experiences that we're creating that again align with your brand values and make sense for you as a brand. I mean, I would love to like also know from you, like how do you because you work across all of CPG, so like how do you pick those trending moments that make sense for the various brands that you speak with and how you support.
Oh my gosh, such a big question. And
and it's a broad question.
Hopefully my Wi-Fi will be strong enough to let me answer. But we look at it two ways. Google does this really cool thing we think about. It's called 10x thinking. So we're not trying to solve something by 5% or 10% or even 20%. We shoot for the moon. And we have so much fun with our CPG customers in particular who are willing to do that, who are saying, I don't want to just do a little bit. I want to like literally change the planet. I want to make a really big impact. And if you think about our parent company Alphabet, we have so many just brilliant people from all different walks of life, that we can kind of bring all of our pieces and parts together to say, okay, if we want to go after plastics in developing countries, if we want to look at climate and figure out where mosquitoes are going to be, drastically populated, and try to save lives in certain parts of the world. I mean, those are the kinds of initiatives we get to go after. And I think CPGs are just the right type of partner to work with, because you are tied so closely to the end consumer. You recognize exactly what they're asking for. And then you marry that with Google's, not only our AI methodology to be able to determine, okay, we see this coming, right? We can predict this, so let's figure this out before it happens. And we can take all of the geniuses that work within Alphabet and start figuring out who the right people are to tackle the biggest problems. And we get to go after it together. That's the big 10x thinking of Google. The more tactical side is really just helping everybody measure it and saying, okay, if we know this to be true, how, for example, Coty sets their sustainability guidelines, as does all of our CPG customers. This is what we want to get done in 2020, between 2020 and 2025. This is what we want to have by 2030 and beyond. Well, then you've got to be able to measure that. You've got to have some sort of dashboard that says, am I going to hit what I said I was going to hit? And if it does, right, how do I show that back to my consumers? How do they see, how am I transparent back to them and show them? So those are sort of the two angles that we go at, sort of really, really big, and then also just the day-to-day tactical, let's at least make sure you're hitting the things that you asked.
Yeah.
Those are sort of the two main areas, I would say.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I think we're pretty close to time. I don't know if there's any other questions, Carrie or Brianna, if there are any other questions out there.
Oops, I'm not seeing any in the chat actually.
Okay.
So I think if you ladies have any wrap up points, we can give you a few minutes back for your day. Sorry about that.
No, that's all good.
No worries.
Yeah, so I don't have any other questions on my end. If there's none other from you, I think we're good.
No, I think we've covered the big topics, right? Inclusivity, sustainability, Gen Z. I think we've hit all the buckets.
Yep, mentorship, all of it.
Mentorship, exactly.
Awesome. You hit the TikTok, and that's been the secret hidden buzzword of the day. That's like Andy Cohen's drinking game. It's somebody says TikTok, everybody has to.
Exactly.
But thank you both so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you both soon. It's been technical glitch day. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Carrie.
Right. Bye. Thanks, everyone. All right. Now we're going to bring in our next guest, and we actually have a panel coming up for you. So we're going to bring out Jonathan Roman, the Global Director of Consumer Marketing Technology at SiriusXM, Jason Atwater, the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Learning and Development at Exelexis, Chris Cook, Marketing Technology Platform Manager for Electronic Arts, and our and our moderator, Noor Nasir, the VP of Media Innovations and Technology at Basis Technologies. Almost all in one breath, guys. Yay.
Amazing. Thanks for that introduction.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and I'll let you take it away, Nora.
Excellent. Thank you, Carrie. And thanks to everyone who's joining us live, or if you're listening to this, after the fact, if you have more time to do it, welcome to this session. So we're continuing on in this conversation about brands doing good and examining sustainability and maybe some elements related to ESG. I know there's already a ton of conversation that's transpired. So we're going to switch into a little bit of a different zone of ESG. I know it stands for environment, social, and governance. So we're really going to zone in on the social part of the conversation today. So I know our panelists have already been introduced. Jonathan, Chris, Jason, just welcome you all and thank you guys for joining for this conversation.
Yeah, happy to be here. Quick correction. I think SiriusXM was mentioned, but now I'm over at Chime as the new Senior Director of Marketing, Data, and Technology. Also, I'm using an Apple for the first time in my career as my main computer. So instead of a fun background, we're going to have this nice green screen behind me because Zoom is not working with me today. So
that's so funny. I thought, Jonathan, that you did it deliberately because it was green for Chime.
Oh yeah, that's sorry. That's exactly why I did that.
Excellent. Well, with that, I think we can go ahead and jump into this conversation. I think the time's going to end up really flying by. So I want to start off the conversation asking you all something about just being involved in the social aspect of ESG. I think, except for, I would say maybe Jason, there might be a clear indicator of what his involvement is because he is a diversity, equity, and inclusion leader. Really want to make sure we're painting a picture of how you all have decided to commit yourselves and have that interest in the conversation today. So we could go ahead and kick it off with you, Jonathan, if you want to give us some background on what brought you to this conversation and why you have energy here.
Sure. So I think outside of our day-to-day jobs and organizations, it's tremendously important, especially as leaders, to participate in things that maybe aren't listed as your, again, day-to-day responsibilities, but benefit the entirety of the organization, the people that you are working with alongside, whether directly or indirectly, and then the general population, kind of investing time and effort into making the world a little bit of a better place while using your organization as that kind of medium to help you kind of achieve more than you can do on your own. So I always make it a part of my experience at any organization to get involved with the ERGs, to figure out, what they're doing from a humanitarian effort, from a donation and a causation effort, and try to, sometimes it can be stressful, especially if like the workload and the day is busy, but I think it's tremendously valuable and important. And I encourage everybody on my team to kind of do that same thing and participate in that way at the companies.
I love that. And I love you encouraging others to also join in and gain the benefit of not just fulfilling, what you can gain from being a part of those conversations and affecting that change, but encouraging others to do the same. So we'll go from Jonathan to let's go to Chris. Chris, tell us a little bit about your experiences being involved in the social aspect of ESG.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with everything Jonathan said as well, with the importance of ERG work within the organization. I've always made it a point to make sure myself, I am openly participating in a lot of these ERGs and promoting them within my own team as well. And yeah, I think it fosters the type of environment that I personally want to work in. And I hope that it also produces an environment that other people will see within the organization and want to work here as well, because those are the types of people that I want to work with.
Fostering the right environment. I love that. So important. And every employee can play a role in making that happen. So I appreciate those points, Christopher. And we'll cut to Jason. Jason, if you want to share a little bit, especially since it extends not past your work, but it's the core of your work. If you can tell us a little bit about your involvement.
Yeah, it really is the core of my work. But I think similar to what both Chris and Jonathan have said, the ERG and that type of work was really kind of the gateway drug. I wasn't always the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think really what got me involved in this work was my desire to, for all the companies that I work for, to leave them better than I found them, and to really give voice to people who felt like they didn't have a voice within the company and direct change, both internally and externally in a company. So having things like employee resource groups were such an excellent way of giving voice to the employees. Of you have all this resource here of employees who want to help the company do better, both the way products are marketed or the way we hire, all of those, and everything in between. And that's what really got me involved in this work. And then I realized that it was really the passion of my life. And I switched from marketing, which was my original career, for 15 years, and realized that diversity, equity, inclusion was actually a much more important thing for me to do. And I made that transition into doing it full time.
I think a couple folks out there, more than a couple, have had that exposure to the gateway drug of ERGs and have made that transition, especially I would say in the last 2 years, which leads me to pivot to my next question, which is at least first directed at you, Jason, but of course I'd love Christopher and Jonathan to join in on it as well if they have energy here. As a longtime leader from a DEI perspective and having an expanded interest in DEI predating your current roles, how have you experienced brands really stepping up the type of work that they're doing to prioritize diversity?
Yeah, I think, Nor, you hit on a big point, in particular the last couple of years, with the kind of sea change that has happened with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and all the others, and anti-Asian American violence. And I think it's really forced companies who otherwise were kind of reticent to make public statements or to take public stances. It's kind of forced them to get out of that reticence and actually take a stand because their employees have demanded it. And I think that's employees and customers have demanded it, that they were taking their dollars to companies that were making stands. And I think in the past, companies that I work for were also very hesitant to make public statements. But once again, ERGs were really great at applying the pressure to saying, this is important to your employees that we talk about these things both internally and externally. And talk about, we had, in a past company, we had an all hands meeting just specifically to talk about George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And it was a really cathartic, and this was, shortly after it happened. And it was an open forum where all employees could come, they could ask questions, they could talk about this. And it was really important to have that outlet for people to, particularly to ask questions for those who maybe didn't really understand what Black Lives Matter was, or didn't understand why people got upset if you said things like all lives matter instead of Black Lives Matter, and being able to in a safe zone talk about those things and explain to people who otherwise maybe didn't really understand, to give them the feedback from people who are heavily involved in it, was an incredible opportunity to build some bridges and to educate some people on things that they were maybe unclear or had negative impressions about, but maybe hearing it from other people helped them to center and understand a little bit better.
It's taking me back. I think now it's been almost 2 years and it still feels like it happened recently. A part of it feels like it was a long time ago. It feels like a lot of time has passed. It's unexplainable how important these shifts have been. And it's unfortunate that it took so much pain and distress to get us to a place where corporations are open to enabling this level of engagement. So I know these observations are ones that can be made by employees, whether or not they necessarily are functioning in official DEI capacity. I don't know, Jonathan or Chris, if you had anything additive that you wanted to build on top of what Jason shared.
Yeah, I think some of the greatest moments, I think, coming from some of the company outreach programs or presentations or time that was made by organizations to talk about some of these really difficult and terrible issues, has been the education component. So Jason, what you had mentioned, like some people not knowing what these terms mean or why certain things are upsetting, or just they were too afraid to ask on their own, but these events provide them that opportunity and that window to reach out to somebody and actively engage and learn more about their ERGs, where they can go and be a supporter or an ally, even if they don't fit in that specific demographic that the group was created for, and really learn and become a better person. So I think I've seen some amazing examples at organizations where, some amazing conversations were started from that. And then on the pride side, which is typically where I have my focus in organizations as well. So like kind of the part of the organization or the ERG that supports the LGBTQ plus members of the group. I've had people reach out to me and ask about, pronouns and just like why certain questions about their own children that, they were hoping to get a little bit more insight or understanding on. So tremendously rewarding for sure.
And yeah, Chris, if you wanted to jump in with any additional thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with everything being said with the importance of the ERG work, bringing in, not just the specific community that the ERG represents, but also the intersectionality with the other ERGs and with the company as a whole, and providing those safe spaces to talk about issues particular to one community, but being able to outreach to the rest of the company and be able to speak through those issues.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's super important too, as a person who's also heavily involved with a series of different ERGs at Basis Technologies. I think that intersectionality piece, where that there's a desire to develop allyship and then also create safe spaces for people who share common identity traits. There's a very informed experience that transpires when you try to meld these groups together, and in addition to bringing allies into the groups as well. So really appreciate the point there, Chris. So we'll expand from there into getting a little bit more information on what some of these additional programs are connected to DE&I that we're seeing at organizations. So I'll leave it open-ended, and we'll just see who has like the yellow box first. In my mind, maybe Jason has a very informed thought here because he leads DEI programming, but Chris and Jonathan and even myself, like we're all experiencing DEI programming, seeing it coming down for a period of time now. So I'm just curious, what are some of the key initiatives that are being extended to employees to enable the embrace of DEI? I'll leave that open for whoever.
I'll jump in there, because it's literally what I'm doing right now. As I'm relatively new with the company I'm at now, and one of the main reasons I was hired to take this job was to create the DEI strategy for the company, because this is a new path that they're on, to really have a concerted effort to create a more inclusive and a sense of belonging and a diverse environment throughout the company, and they're very strongly committed to it. And really some of the key things, as I'm rolling out the strategy, was really understanding, where are we now? Where's the company at now? So I think before you can start coming up with solutions or problem solving, you really need to understand how the employees feel about diversity, equity, inclusion. What do they understand about it? Because there's a lot of misconceptions about when you say the term diversity, or when you say equity and inclusion. Even understanding what those mean can be problematic, because people have negative opinions. Sometimes when you say the word diversity with regards to recruiting and hiring and promotions and things like that, people think diversity means lowering standards, or diversity means quotas and things like that. So dispelling misconceptions it becomes a really early part of things, is having those conversations, so that people don't think that having a more diverse focus on how you're writing job descriptions, or how you're doing promotions, or where you're going to hire people is somehow taking away from existing groups. And so the education is a big piece in the beginning, and then once you've at least gotten on some foundation where everybody kind of understands the basic diversity principles, then you can start building on it and really tackling bigger issues like intersectionality, and bigger issues like anti-racism and homophobia, and just microaggressions, and all the things that you need to tackle in order to move an organization forward. You need to have that foundation first, or else it's not going to work. If you're trying to start, you can't run a marathon if you haven't done any training first. And I think that's what a lot of companies, why they fail at this, is because they try to jump in and immediately start creating programs. It's like, no, you have to take a step back and make sure you're meeting people where they are, and starting from there, which is what I've spent the last almost 3 months, is trying to meet everyone here where they are.
Fair points there. Chris, did you have something you wanted to jump in with?
Yeah, I wanted to echo the education piece of what Jason is saying. I think one thing I noticed at EA was the company published a report last year on the gender and racial makeup of the company, at least for the US. And I believe it was it's the first time I've been at a company that's done this. I'm not sure if this is, out of the norm, but the report doesn't just show overall numbers of the breakdown of the different groups, but it shows it alongside that same breakdown within leaders and technical roles. And so anyone can look at this report, and the problem is obvious. You can look at it and see the gap. And I think that is one important piece for educating the company as to what these issues are. And it's the first step in recognizing it and being able to see it right there. The data is right there. And yeah, I think it was something unique that I've seen. And I think it helps drive the correct conversations.
Yeah, super important. I've seen more and more of those reports, and it really is a good accountability piece too, right? For the organizations to say, we're going to take the time to create this reporting. We're going to take a look in the mirror, and now we're going to disclose it, because I think sometimes actually organizations, they do the math in the background, but they don't necessarily always feel comfortable extending it to their company. And definitely they don't always feel comfortable extending it publicly, but more and more organizations are doing it. And I think it's because they're looking for that accountability and to just move everything forward. So I love that. I love that point too. I think for the sake of time, because the time is just flying by actually quite quickly, as you all are bringing up really good points, I'll move us into another question that's specifically focused around recruitment. And I know, a lot of very good points have already been made, Jason, as it relates to recruitment and diversity. But there are these sometimes negative sentiments that people attach to diversity hires. And people have started using it sometimes with that tone. So I'm curious from your perspective, as far as brands really pushing forward to enable that diverse hiring to occur, so that we can bring in those that more diverse array of employees and demographics. What are the steps that employers need to take and brands need to take? Because I think if to make a call back again to 2 years ago, a lot of organizations were saying, well, where are they? Can't find them. It's too hard. So Jason, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, that's a common people throw their hands up. Oh, we've tried to look to increase diversity and we never get any applications, or they're not qualified for the roles. And my question to that is always, where are you looking? And for me, it's all about the relationships that you're building on the recruiting side. Are you building relationships with organizations like Afrotech and Techeria and women in tech organizations to go out and actively look for it, which historically about colleges and historically Latin serving colleges? Are you building those relationships so that you're finding diverse candidates from all sorts of places? And if you're not doing that, then that's why you're not finding people. If you're just looking in the same 3 universities that you always hire from, or from the same 5 companies that you always poach people from, you're going to end up with the same people over and over again. But if you expand your talent pool, then you'll bring in talent. It's always still about finding the most qualified candidates, but you need to be looking for them in as many different places as possible. And the other side of that also is you can bring in diverse candidates, but if your organization hasn't done the work to be a welcoming and inclusive place, you may get people to join the company, but they're not going to stay. They're going to attrit out because they don't feel welcome. So you need to have done that work so that the entire process, from the first moment they see a job posting, that job posting is written in a way that isn't exclusive. It isn't excluding people that haven't gone to an Ivy League university, or it isn't excluding women, because all these studies that show women will only apply for a job where they feel like they check off every single box from the job description. So if you're including things that aren't really necessary for the job, you're already excluding 50% of the population, because the women won't apply for the job. And so all those things, doing all that work, doing things in your marketing for jobs, that you're showing what a welcoming environment is, that you're highlighting the ERGs that exist in your company so that people want to work for your company. And all of those things are, if you put all those things in place, you will find more diverse candidates, and your company will naturally become a more diverse place. But you have to do the work to do it. You can't just do a token effort and say, oh, we couldn't find anybody.
I want to position the question right back to you, Jason, but then I also want to position the question to Jonathan and Chris. I think there's something interesting about our panelists because you all three work for very, I would say, companies that are in different stages of their own trajectory. You work in different industries, but to point it back towards you first, Jason, you work in an industry where there is this proclivity to hire from maybe the Ivy Leagues or for people who have a very specific STEM-oriented background, and there are these like rigid ways in which hiring takes place that are not so easy to abandon. I work in advertising. It's a little bit different in terms of sometimes the openness or flexibility to let people use transferable skills. Can't exactly use transferable skills all the time in an industry like yours. So maybe you can just give some expanded, paint a little bit of an expanded picture on how you've been trying to overcome those hurdles in the genomic space, which
so in this space, we have a lot of PhDs, a lot of doctors, a lot of scientists that work here, and I think it's important that once again, there are PhD programs in chemistry and science and oncology and all the things that we're looking for in a variety of schools. So it's me pushing and our whole kind of HR and recruiting team pushing the boundaries of where we're looking, so that we're once again going to historically Black colleges and historically Latin serving colleges and making efforts to find people, and even going earlier to having internship programs for students in, say, in the Oakland school district, and looking for high school kids to get them involved earlier that may have an interest in science, but maybe they were afraid to make that jump because they didn't see anybody that looked like them in that role. They couldn't imagine themselves in those roles. So getting those people early and bringing them in and exposing them to the labs and all the exciting things that the company does to get them involved earlier, so that when they go to college, they're just like, oh, okay, I can see myself in a science role. I want to get a PhD in chemistry, or I want to get a PhD, I want to go to medical school and work to cure cancer. So I think that kind of stuff is important, is making that investment early that may not be an immediate payoff in getting a hire, but that leads to a bigger talent pool down the road of people that the company can hire.
Yeah, these long-term permanent commitments have to be made in order for that change to eventually take effect, 10, 15, 20 years from now. So I appreciate that point. I try to let the panelists know about questions I'm going to ask ahead of time. So not to throw like a little bit of a wrench into it, Jonathan and Chris, but I said I was going to ask you both a question. The thing about EA is that EA is a brand that is a household name. Everybody knows they create video games, but I imagine over the decades that they've been in existence that there's been shifts that have happened internally. People love their products, but there's also the fact that they've probably been making some pivots in terms of how they approach hiring. Chris, I'm just curious about anything that you've noticed, which is going to end up being a different question for Jonathan since Chime hasn't been around that long. But Chris, any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah. I think when it comes to the actual hiring practices, it's not something that I've been too closely involved with myself. I think one thing that Jason did touch on, however, is the building of a company to attract diverse talent, organically. And I think to bring it back around to the employee resource groups, I feel like that's the main thing that I'm involved with, that I feel like is working to build that space for diverse talent. And I think without having strong employee resource group initiatives, and without making sure the employees that are dedicating their time and resources to putting on those events, putting on these different activities with the ERGs, without the company needs to get behind those employees and provide them with the compensation if able, or at least the space needed in their normal day-to-day jobs to be able to work on building those ERGs. I think that could be a key way to organically attract diverse talent.
Yeah, it's actually such an important point that you brought up, that the ERG piece. I actually was interviewing somebody earlier today. I've interviewed a series of people this week, and each time at the end of the interview, and if these candidates were diverse, they had some sort of diverse identity element to them. I said, ask me anything. I've been at this company for a long time. And they consistently were asking about the ERGs. Like that was the end question that they had a curiosity around. They're like, I feel more comfortable applying to this company because I see you're making a commitment to this. So like, there's so much truth to that. It's a really important point.
Yeah, I'd love to add a little bit to that as well. So there are so many things that may come off as silent bias too. So outside of just the outreach side of things, look at your job descriptions, look at how you're wording things. And if it's presenting any sort of language that may be exclusionary, there are some great resume building and then also just like JD building tools that are out there now that will actually tell you if you're using inherently biased language. So now we have technology to kind of help us along this journey for those that may not, kind of understand out of the gate, like this terminology or asking for this set of requirements that might be unattainable for a large segment of the community and in diverse communities as well. Is that really like necessary for this job position, or can we really take a step back and look at that? I think another thing I've done as a hiring manager is when like that pool of diverse candidates is not available, you start looking towards the candidate pool that is available. Are they allies? Have they been involved with ERGs in the past? Are they going to uplift and promote other members of these different diverse communities and help with future talent that may come on board, making them feel welcome and like it's a great place to be. So there are a ton of alternative things you can do as well to just help with that, even if it's not immediately accessible to the organization.
Love that point too. Thanks for bringing that up, Jonathan. It is one of those more subtle things that is just sometimes lost on people, is that we need to make these modifications to make people feel welcome. And I think that's a thread that's come across the course of the conversation that we've had today, that it's really in the details that a lot of these messages, we're sending silent messages to people about whether or not we're going to be accepting of them. So.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to add on that as well, in terms of the ERG, two cool things one cool thing, one not great thing that I've experienced personally is being offered during the interview process. Like as I was interviewing in certain cases, there'd be an optional additional interview where you could meet with a head of some of either the diversity and inclusion groups or the ERGs, not for them to grade you specifically, but more for you as a candidate to talk to them and ask them those questions about like, hey, what are you doing? How are things in terms of ERG development? Is it a really solid group? Because I've also been part of experiences where, companies tout this amazing ERG group experience and they list out all of their ERGs that support different groups. So it gets you excited. But then when you join the organization, you find that these groups are underfunded. So they have no actual funding to help create events, spread awareness, kind of help. Or the groups are empty. There hasn't been any nurturing put into the ERG space. So you have like, on paper, we have ERGs, but then when you actually enter into the organization, it's like a ghost town in a lot of these ERGs that were set up. So I think it's really important to bring in leaders like Jason into organizations where it's like, hey, this isn't just everybody who has free time after they do their day-to-day, role and responsibility to help foster this environment. Hire somebody dedicated to that can lead that and to really build it out, find out the problem areas and really just make sure that those groups continue to grow. So your organization doesn't look like they were just like talking all this stuff and didn't actually hold true to that promise when you joined, because that will also lead to retention issues and people will notice and they will leave if they get that sense of, genuinity. I can't even words.
Yeah. I completely agreed with you. When it comes across disingenuous, it has the opposite effect. And I think, unfortunately, like even everything that you were just describing now, Jonathan, it makes me think that sometimes ERGs, they're secretly presented like an extracurricular after school activity, based on the way that you just set it up, and that underfunding and or that negligence, that lack of support, not having a Jason there to support and make sure that those groups have that visibility and can be propped up to be successful. It has the opposite effect. It's like it's not a set it and forget it. So I think that stems, it takes us in the direction of another question, which frankly, I probably should have asked earlier, which is just getting the definition of what an ERG or BRG is, because we've been using the acronym nonstop. I think that's fortunately just current life, you just start using an acronym without sharing exactly what it stands for. But maybe it would be fair to toss it back to Jason to just give us the high level on what are ERGs.
Yeah, so for me, ERGs, and ERG stands for Employee Resource Group. And when you really think about what they are, they're employee-led organizations, typically revolving around some sort of identity. And that identity could be anything from race or ethnicity or gender or veteran status or parental status. It could be any number of things, any number of identities that exist out there. And those groups are typically formed as a support group. It could be as a safe space. It could be as an active group that's trying to make changes within an organization. But I think the key part of it is that it's employee-led. I think some companies try to force ERGs to happen because that's the hot thing that everybody's doing. So they're trying to force it. If the employees aren't motivated to make this happen, it's never going to be successful. And that means that the companies have to be supportive, and that one of the things that John and I worked for one company together, and there were issues where sometimes managers gave people who joined employee resource groups and were in the steering committees and things like that, gave them problems for spending too much company time on employee resource groups. And so that made those people less likely to want to volunteer to be part of the steering committee, part of the leadership of a group, because they felt that it threatened their position. And that's the most detrimental thing that can happen to a company for ERGs, because if people don't feel like they can be a part of it and contribute, they won't do it.
And recognizing and celebrating as a manager, as a people manager, if your teams are taking extra time out of their day, they're balancing their workload and they're also doing ERG involvement or community service, yes, or anything that is helping to give back for both the internal employees and just the larger world, that should be celebrated. And something I've started doing specifically is we all have the review times during the year, right? And then, a lot of companies, they do bonuses and they do merit-based increases. I factor ERG involvement into that. I say you're not mandated as your manager, you're not mandated to do this stuff, but I will tell you, it is going to impact how much of a bonus you potentially get versus your peers. Because if everybody's doing great work, but then you have somebody who's also participating in ERGs, leading events, just learning and becoming a better human being, I want to reward them for that, because ultimately it is going to make the organization a better place. So I encourage all the managers out there, start thinking about that and encouraging your employees and really giving them space, making that space for them in certain cases for them to get more actively involved, because that's going to keep them around longer. That's going to make them overall happy. And it's going to show to them that you care, you care and you care about them. And I think it's just a great thing to do overall.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think. Sorry. Go ahead, Chris. Jump in.
Just to add that I think one of the other great things with the ERGs is that, they can also help amplify the voices of those employees that may be part of these marginalized communities and may not always have as strong of a voice with some of the company's leadership when it comes to things like benefits. Some communities may have unique benefits that some of their needs might not be met because they don't have as strong of a voice in the room when those types of benefits are being decided on. So that's one way that an ERG can also function within the organization.
It's another great point, and especially if you're still early in your hiring days as far as trying to bring that diversity. So there are going to be employees that there's no strength in numbers, and speaking up is going to be exceptionally more challenging as a result of that. So it's a great point to note. I think another layer here is that we've really been talking about the employee experience, the thing that's happening inside for the brand itself. But the thing is, you all work for brands that are public facing, and some of those brands in particular like Chris and Jonathan, those are household names. I know EA, I've known EA forever. And even though Chime hasn't been around as long, I'm very familiar with all their commercials and with their products. So let's talk about the customer experience and some of the products that are being developed. I'm curious about how ERGs can help support brands themselves doing good for the audiences that they are serving. And Chris, I'll throw that question to you.
Yeah, sure. So to give more of a concrete example of that within EA, one of the titles at EA is The Sims, and it is basically a game about living a simulated life. And for many of the Sims players, there's been a desire to include the option to designate your Sims with non-gendered pronouns, as those players may do in their own lives. And I think EA has recently announced that the Maxis team has been working on including this feature for a while now, but there has been some challenges with doing something like this because it's important to make sure that the way that one character in the game is addressing a character that uses these non-gendered pronouns, it's important to make sure that it's being done in the correct and respectful way. And then not only that, but how is that then done in 20 plus different languages? And those types of challenges, it's really important for members of those communities to offer guidance in how to do that. And one way that EA has been able to get that guidance is through our ERGs. Our Pride ERG, which is the LGBTQ employee resource group, has been there to assist these teams with guidance on how to make sure that the product that's being developed will authentically meet our players' needs and the expectations.
Thanks for sharing that example, Chris. Jonathan, I'm curious if you have an example that you want to share before. I know we're running low on time, and we're going to pivot into questions briefly. We don't have a massive group attending in real time, so I feel like we can bleed over a little bit. Carrie, let me know if I'm right about that. But Jonathan, I'd be curious for any perspective from if Chime has done anything similar.
I love hearing stories about like what Chris just talked about, and then actual ERGs influencing products that are being built out. Because you have different companies that have the ability to represent a lot of these groups in different ways. Sometimes you're a CPG company and it's a little bit more difficult to figure out, like, how do we represent this? It kind of goes into the advertising sector, right? Like, how do we make sure these groups are being represented in there? Well, when there is the ability to kind of change the product to be more inclusive, I always love those moments. So at Chime, a recent example that was really great to hear was the Outchimers, which is our Pride-based group as well, LGBTQ plus group. They actually helped influence a feature of the in-app experience for our members where they could use their preferred name. So there was something that they advocated for, they really fought for. They took it upstairs, they talked to leadership, they put together a proposal, and it wound up being enabled within the app that users could put their preferred name. And it's the little things like that that make people going through those transitionary periods just feel just so much more normalized to be able to use things like their preferred name in things like banking apps. So that's a recent example of something I could think of that was really great work that came out one of our internal ERGs.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that as well, Jonathan. I'm going to quickly actually throw it back to Chris, because I think the thing is oftentimes when we do these narrations, we think of a cycle of, well, the ERG can inform the brand, and then the company can change the product, and then who's the beneficiary? It is the consumer, but it actually can work the other way. Chris, did you have an example of when it worked the other way?
Sure, yeah, and I have to do my best to keep this vague so I don't get into any trouble, but I think without going into too much detail, there can be cases where decisions are being made based on the product we're delivering, and those decisions can affect specific communities. And in order to best make those decisions, I know this might sound a little bit like common sense, but it's always best to have people from those communities being a part of those discussions. And in some cases, you might not have those communities within the company, or even in the room when those decisions are being made. So it's important to make sure that there is a representative, someone from that community, to help make those decisions. And if you don't have that within the company, I think it's also a good point for you to start looking more into those, the strategies that you're using with hiring and making sure that you are hiring diverse employees.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that point, Chris. And I know it's a little bit vague. I'll be honest, like there's a really good story behind it. And I just want to say that the overarching narrative is that it is really important to talk to those folks if they do not work at your company, but you are serving those communities. And I would really take that point away, because you can feel really strong within a regionalized group. But then the reality is you don't have the experiences of everyone else. We all have more to learn, and we should always be open to it. And I think that's what we really tried to hone in on today for the session. So I want to thank everyone, Chris, Jonathan, and Jason, for making yourselves available. And it's been a pleasure doing this panel with you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And that's actually, this is our Bringing It Home panel for the day. So thanks everyone for coming. And I think just kind of Jason said one thing when he said, just do the work. And I think that was an overarching theme to our whole day today. It's been absolutely wonderful and inspiring to be a part of this one. So thanks everybody. Big shout out to all of our speakers and our sponsors. And of course, you folks in the audience at home. Thanks for hanging out a couple extra minutes with us today. And don't forget to check out our Brand Innovators website to learn more about any more upcoming events.